Okay, welcome everybody, distinguished guests, Justice Katju and the other speakers in today's
May I
very...
interrupt you for a moment? May I
Yes,
interrupt?
please.
Sanjana Jayant has joined us. She is a Kannadiga who lives in Sydney, Australia. So she joined us from Australia.
Okay, very welcome.
In Sydney.
Okay.
She's a Kannadiga, she's not a Tamilian.
That's okay.
She is muted, I think. She is trying to say something. She is muted.
Sorry, I wasn't able to talk until now, so it's better now. Hi, I'm Sanjana. I live in Sydney, and it's just good to be with you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. So I would like to request all those who are not speaking to mute themselves, if possible, because just to avoid echoing of the sound. So welcome everybody. Good afternoon to all of you to this very important and I expect very exciting in some ways discussion is going to happen based on the ideas and views and perception of Justice Katju, who's very well known all over the country and probably internationally also. I would like to say right at the outset that this is not a television channel and I'm not Arnab Goswami. So I'm not going to shout at anybody and I'll make sure that nobody shouts at anybody. But the main purpose of this discussion is to actually try and understand Justice Katju's great understanding of languages, Indian languages, particularly from the north of India, and also from the south, because he has lived here in Chennai as the Chief Justice of the Madras High Court, and he's been involved with the language issues for a very long period of time. To give a very brief introduction to Justice Katju, who will be our first speaker, I would request everybody to speak for 10 minutes maximum each. We have 7 speakers. Then we can come back. We'll have a round of some questions, but speakers will get a second chance to come back to the topics they want to speak about. To introduce Justice Katju, he is from Allahabad. I won't go beyond that, where he originally is from, but he was probably born and brought up in Allahabad, which, as many people familiar with the north of India would know, was the center of intellectual activity for a very, very long period of time, the last 150, 200 years. Some of the biggest political leaders, jurists, poets, writers in the north of India, they come from Allahabad. And Allahabad University used to be one of the top universities in India. And it's one of the oldest universities in India also. And he comes from a very illustrious family of jurists and politicians. And he practiced as a lawyer in the Allahabad High Court from 1970 to 1981 before he was elevated to the High Court as a judge initially and then as the Chief Justice of the Allahabad High Court. Subsequently, he came to Madras High Court as the Chief Justice. So he's familiar with politics of Tamil Nadu and probably more details, culture and so on and so forth. So he's a person who is knowledgeable about Tamil affairs. So he's not the typical person from the north of India who's trying to tell people in Tamil Nadu why they should learn Hindi. And also, to complete his biography, he was then appointed to the Supreme Court of India in April 2006, and he retired in September 2011, after which he was the chairman of the Press Council of India for 3 years. But he has continued to be very active politically, at least in terms of his pronouncements and his writings. He's been very provocative, and he's well known for that. But he's provocative only because I think, this is my personal view, he's far ahead of the times in some ways. He thinks very far ahead, future of the whole South Asian subcontinent. He's not just thinking about India. In fact, he's founder of an organization which calls for reunification of large parts of South Asia, which was divided during the partition. And he doesn't recognize these national boundaries outside India, so he doesn't recognize boundaries within India also in some ways. So his idea of Hindi is not the usual idea of Hindi that people, what we call the Hindi walas of northern India have, which is a very official and very Sanskritized Hindi. Justice Katju, as far as I understand, is a proponent of Hindustani, which is actually the spoken language of the people on the streets, which is a grand mix of many languages, including what is today the official Sanskritized Hindi, and a large amount of Urdu, which itself is derived largely from Persian and other origins, but born and developed in the Indian subcontinent. In fact, Urdu developed in the Deccan, so it's actually a South Indian language in some ways. But having said that, I will not take more time, and I'll request Justice Katju to tell us what exactly does he mean when he says that Tamilians should learn Hindustani, and why should they learn it? How will they benefit? And what does he think of the opposition to this idea? Whether it is right and what can be done in a constructive way? Because as I said earlier, we don't want to get into a acrimonious fight here. If we can find a way how the current situation can be dealt with, the sensitivities involved, and come up with constructive answers to the benefit of everybody, that will be a great outcome of this debate. Thank you very much, and over to you, Justice Katju.
Thank you, and good afternoon to all of you. Let me first of all tell you that I have very close connection with Tamil Nadu. I was a student of the Annamalai University in 1967-68. And I was a student there, and I remember that was the peak of the anti-Hindi agitation. And I would go with the students of Annamalai University marching to Chidambaram railway station. And on the way, the student would shout, "Hindi odi hai, down with Hindi." And I would also shout, "Hindi odi hai." When you are in Rome, do as the Romans do. And at the Chidambaram railway station, we would blacken all the Hindi signs on the platform. I would also do that. Although Hindi is my mother tongue, but I did it because I'm totally opposed to imposition of Hindi. So why I'm saying this is that I have opposed Hindi imposition by deeds. You people have only opposed it by words. I've gone further, I've opposed it in deeds actually. Then of course I was Chief Justice of Madras High Court 2004, 2005. I've got a lot of friends there. I do not regard my mother tongue Hindi as superior to Tamil. Tamil has a very rich literature, very rich culture. I'm totally against imposition of Hindi on anybody. At the same time, I have said repeatedly, and I've been often misunderstood, that while I'm opposed to Hindi imposition, I advise Tamilians to learn Hindi because it is in their own interest. And I want to tell you why. See, if you come out of Tamil Nadu, you will have a lot of problems if you do not know Hindi. Let me tell you frankly, about 75 to 80% people in India can speak manageable Hindi. About 43-44% people speak it as a first language, like UP, which is my state, Bihar, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Haryana, Delhi, Himachal Pradesh, even Andaman Islands. I went there, they speak Hindi. And apart from that, 43-44%, another 35% also speak Hindi as a second language. For example, if you go to Maharashtra, they speak Marathi, but every Maharashtrian also speaks Hindi. Every Gujarati speaks Gujarati, but he also speaks Hindi. Every Punjabi speaks Punjabi, but he also speaks Hindi. Every Kashmiri, that is my home state. Kashmiri is totally different from Hindi, but every Kashmiri also speaks Hindi. I've lived in Bengal. Bengalis mostly can also, their mother tongue is Bangla, but they can also speak manageable Hindi. It's not very grammatically correct. They say, "Hum aata hai, tum jata hai," but you can understand and he can speak. Telangana, of course, because it was the Nizam Dominion, they all speak Hindi. They call it Urdu, but it's actually the same, except the script is different. And in, I'll tell you something very interesting. I was Chief Justice of Madras High Court, and I was traveling I was invited to Gulbarga University, which is in northern Karnataka. So I flew from Chennai to Hyderabad in Andhra Pradesh. And from there, I went by taxi to Gulbarga. Now, a professor of Gulbarga University came to Hyderabad to receive me, and I was traveling on the taxi with him from Hyderabad to Gulbarga. On the way, what I heard was that the professor of Gulbarga University was talking to the taxi driver in Hindi. So I was surprised. I said, both of you are South Indians. Why are you talking in Hindi? So the professor said that we are speaking in Hindi because my mother tongue is Kannada. This driver's mother tongue is Telugu. I don't know Telugu. He does not know Kannada. But both of us know Hindi. So this is our linked language. Otherwise, we can't communicate with each other. So what I mean to say is, if you come, for example, from Chennai to Delhi, now English is known by only 5 to 10% people of India. Some people say make English the link language, but it's known by hardly 5 to 10% people in India. Hindi is known by almost 80%. I was sitting on a bench in the Supreme Court with Justice H.K. Sima, who's a Naga, and I used to talk with him in Hindi. He told me every Naga, they have the Naga language, but every Naga also speaks Hindi. So if you come to Delhi and from Delhi airport, you want to take a taxi to your hotel or some home. Now the taxi driver in Delhi does not know English, nor does the auto driver. So you will have a lot of difficulty if you do not know Hindi. In fact, Pakistanis speak Hindi. They call it Urdu, but it is the same. I have a lot of Pakistani friends and I talk to them on Skype and we speak in Hindi. By Hindi, I mean simple Hindi, Hindustani. So all Pakistanis speak Hindi. So if you know Hindi, it will be very convenient to you. For this reason, I'll tell you another interesting thing. I was Chief Justice of Madras High Court. I once went to Madurai. We have a bench of the High Court in Madurai. So I went to the market and I went to a shop and I found a Tamil shopkeeper talking to his customer in Hindi. So I was surprised and I went to him. I picked up a bit of Tamil. I said, Nalla Hindi pesringa yepadi. How are you speaking such good Hindi? I spoke to him in Tamil and he replied in Hindi that the politicians have their own agenda, but I have to do business. Many of my customers are Hindi speakers, so I had to learn it to do business. So what I'm trying to say is that it is in your own interest to learn Hindi. And one thing I may tell you, and please correct me if I'm wrong. This is the information I have got from a Tamilian. He said these Tamilian politicians, they will make sure that their own children learn Hindi and they will send their children to government schools where Hindi is taught because they know it is in the interest of their children to learn Hindi. But to others, they say, don't learn Hindi imposition. Then why are you making sure that your own child learns Hindi? Because you know it is in the interest of your child to learn Hindi. So what I'm suggesting, I'm totally opposed to Hindi, but please consider, I love you people. I have fought for you when the Jallikattu agitation was going on. I was the only North Indian who supported you. When I was Chief Justice of Madras High Court, I proposed that Tamil should also be made a language of the High Court along with English, although my proposal was not accepted. So all through, I have supported you. So please don't think I'm your enemy or I want to impose Hindi. I'm totally against, I have fought against Hindi imposition. You people are not. You people only talk of it. So therefore, I suggest, please consider what I say. Again and again, I say, look, this is my suggestion. If you think my suggestion carries sense, then accept it. If you think it does not carry sense, reject it. What's the problem? So this is all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Justice Katju. That was a very clear kind of laying out of your position. And it's a nuanced position. And we can, as I said earlier, also your position is not the same as many other people in the north of India. And the problem, I think, has been historically not about Tamilians not wanting to learn Hindi as such. There are a lot of people in Tamil Nadu who do learn Hindi, and spoken Hindi particularly. But I guess it's been basically about not wanting Hindi to be imposed through the government directives or through policy, and being made compulsory. But that is a subject that other speakers will say much more about, and they will also respond constructively to your suggestion, which is actually a request, very, very well put and very polite request to people in Tamil Nadu to consider learning Hindi for their own benefit. I would like to invite next Sri Natraj, who's the member of the Legislative Assembly from Mylapore constituency, to say a few words. I would recommend a time limit of around 10 minutes, if he can keep his statement within
Before
that.
Mr. Natraj speaks, I want to introduce him to all of you. I have known him for a long time. When I was Chief Justice Madras High Court, I used to go for morning walks to Theosophical Society ground, and he would come with his wife there. He was Police Commissioner Chennai, and we became friends since then. And he's one of the best politicians in India. He is totally dedicated. He is MLA from Mylapore, and I believe he set up an office where anybody, poor man, can come, and he helps people there. This is the kind of politician we need in India, who helps people. I'm not concerned with DMK, ADMK or anything, but the politician should help the people, and Mr. Natraj is doing an excellent job as from the reports I have got. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a great introduction.
Thank you very much, sir, for your very kind words. Justice Katju and all other panel members and viewers. I'm very happy to participate in this webinar. Of course, it's a very it's a controversial topic, and in fact, when some people heard that I'm going to speak on this in this webinar, they said, no, better be careful. I mean, I'm known for, even during my interaction with the media, I used to say whatever came to my mind, whatever was truthful. And they used to say, sir, whatever you say, we have to really edit and publish, because that is the kind of person I am. So this one, as far as this particular issue is concerned, Justice Katju has very beautifully said that that he is against imposition of any language. That has been the consistent stand of successive governments of Tamil Nadu also. If you trace the language issue, language is always an emotional issue. We cannot say that it is for business, for utility, that comes secondary. The main thing is it is an emotional issue. It is linked to our heritage, linked to our culture, linked to our society. I can say that language is the eyes and ears through which you connect to society. So anybody trying to tamper with that, there will be opposition, there will be an upsurge. That's what we experienced in 1938 when the then Chief Minister Rajaji tried to introduce Hindi to be learned in schools. There was a lot of opposition. The Justice Party at that time and other outfits, they all said, no, this is not possible. Again, in 60s, we all know the history. What happened when there was this an effort and an attempt to enforce Hindi, impose Hindi. There was a lot of opposition and a lot of violence in Tamil Nadu, and that has been a change of scene that catapulted the regional party into power, and this has continued as a kind of emotional issue. Our mentor, Arinyar Anna, very clearly said, we are against imposition of any language, but we respect all languages. We respect all languages as much as we are aligned to our mother tongue, the way we worship our mother tongue. The other languages are also equally important. We accept that, but we are against imposition of any language. And you also very graphically put it that in a wall you make a hole big enough for the cat and kitten to come. And why should you have a separate hole for a rat? So for the kitten, so there is no need for another hole. The one is sufficient. We are comfortable with English, having been ruled by the British for so many years, and we are comfortable with English. English is the language, and Tamil is a mother tongue. And that has been the two language formula, has been the consistent policy of the successive governments, cutting across all party lines. So there is no two-way about it. But as Mr. Katju said, what is the harm in learning another language? Actually, learning another language, there should not be any problem. In fact, what the central government could not achieve, successive central government could not achieve, Bollywood achieved. In fact, the Hindi movies are very popular here. Hindi music is very popular here. Our technicians, our film stars, they all go to Bombay. They are all flourished in the Hindi film world. All those things are there. It's there for all of us to see. But when this emotional issue, language is an emotional issue, if that can pay political dividend, that has paid political dividend, so that will be taken up by every politician to whip up the passions of the people. So nobody would like to kind of cross the limit as far as this particular issue is concerned. In fact, some of the people in public life go out of the way to issue statements. Like one politician issued a statement that in CBSE schools and ICSE schools, which are all different streams, Sanskrit should not be taught, should not be offered as a language. So this is the kind of extreme chauvinism we are pushed to. So that is also bad. There should be a freedom to choose the language. In fact, the new education policy, of course, I don't want to talk about it because that is not the main topic for discussion now, but that says one language as in 8th schedule of the Constitution. You can choose any language. In fact, some of the districts in Tamil Nadu bordering Karnataka or bordering Kerala, the Malayalam and Kannada is offered as a language. In fact, when an act was passed, a Tamil only act was passed in, I think, 2006, 2007, there was a lot of opposition from a Telugu minority and Malayalis. They were all opposed to it, saying that how can you impose this language? We should choose our language. So this is a very emotional issue that we have to be aware of. But as I said, when there is a necessity, the Tamilian has not fought shy of learning it. So I'm sure, in fact, some of the contractors I see in the field, most of our workers are from Bihar and Jharkhand and Orissa and Bengal. And they all speak only Hindi, as Justice Katju very rightly said. And our contractors are speaking to them in Hindi. They are communicating with them and they are comfortable. So when there is a necessity, definitely we'll pick up. But when there is an imposition, definitely that will not. Because imposition of a language or say that you should do this, this is good for you, then somebody does like this, there's always a suspicion. Is there a hidden agenda? The question is asked. So this is the main problem here. Otherwise, there should not be any issue. In fact, even in our government schools, in any place where the enrollment is more than 30 for a particular language, for say, for example, Hindi, more than 30 or Malayalam, more than 30, then they can have a teacher and learn that language. That is there even in government schools. But many of our matriculation schools, 6,500 matriculation schools are there in Tamil Nadu. It's a very peculiar situation where I don't think it is there in other states. You have these matriculation schools, other CBSE schools, which are owned privately and mostly many politicians own it, where Hindi is offered. Hindi is offered as a language, and there is no problem at all. And even in Kendriya Vidyalaya, Hindi is offered, and many of our politicians give recommendation letter for joining people in Kendriya Vidyalaya schools. So where there is a necessity, there should not be any objection. And where there is a voluntarily people wanting to learn, there should be a choice, freedom of choice, so that they'll be in a position to learn a language, learn any other language, so that as Justice Katju said, it will be helpful for them if they have to go out, because now we are a global village. We are not talking about India alone, the whole world. And if at all Indians in Silicon Valley are shining or wanted, is mainly because of their multitasking ability, their knowledge of more than one language. The knowledge of multilingual capability gives them that kind of a quality where they are in a position to do multitasking, and they are wanted in those areas. So it's very essential. Every Indian knows at least 2 languages. That's a very great asset for us. And why not have more languages? In fact, if you go to Bengal and speak in Bengali, everybody is happy. As Mr. Katju, if he comes here and he says Vanakkam, we are also thrilled because he has spoken our language. So there should not be any opposition to any language. At the same time, as Arinder Anna said, there cannot be any imposition. Our 2-language formula, as far as Tamil Nadu is concerned, has served well. It will continue with that. That is a stand of the successive government. At the same time, there can be a freedom to learn other languages. So be it. So there is no issue. But But there is a tendency to any particular issues that you like to politicize on language. On language issue, it is it's a politicized issue. That is a problem. If we forget the politics in it and see how it is going to be helpful to people, let them learn whatever language they want to learn. At the same time, this new education policy, that mother tongue in the first 5 classes, is a very good thing. Though we say Tamil is important, but we find many of the children going to English medium schools. Tamil medium schools are only in the government schools. So this is a very big issue. Now it is going to be mother tongue for up to the formative years. It's a very good thing. We should welcome it. And at the same time, there cannot be any imposition of language, because any imposition means there can be some kind of an agenda where the local people are put to a disadvantage. That cannot happen. A disadvantage for the local people cannot happen, and that no government will approve. So what we should be looking at is a kind of a debate like this, opinion making among the people. Whatever they want, they should be in a position to pursue it. In fact, for the poor people, I get a lot of recommendation for joining in CBSE schools. This is a very, very sad state of affairs which is happening. And poor people are doing, because without any understanding, they are doing this. So there is a need for a proper understanding. There's a proper dissemination of what is good for everybody, and that is very, very essential. And I'm sure this kind of debate will pave way for a kind of a larger appeal and larger understanding of the issues involved. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tirunatraj, for a very clear exposition of your position. And I think you've made a lot of important points. But I would like, before going to the next speaker, I would like to ask Justice Katju a question. How much of this anti-Hindi agitation in places like Tamil Nadu, and today we see it in other parts of India also, this resentment of imposition of Hindi? It's in Karnataka, it's in Bengal, even in the Northeast, though you mentioned the example of the Nagas, which is true, they're using Hindi as a link language. But there is a resentment in many parts of India about the domination of the Hindi-speaking states. There is a feeling that India is run by the Hindi-speaking states, and all non-Hindi speaking states are somehow second class, politically speaking. And it's in a way true also that Indian Parliament is dominated by members of Parliament from the North Indian state, just because of sheer numbers. What would you say to this, briefly?
Yeah, I regard all states as equal. I give equal respect to all states. In fact, India can keep together only if all states are given equal respect and all languages are given equal respect. India has such tremendous diversity that the moment you say that one section will dominate over others, the country cannot hold together. So there must be equal respect to all. I treat Tamil on an equal level as my mother tongue Hindi. I do not regard Hindi to be a superior language. But the fact remains, that Hindi is spoken by maybe 15 times more people than Tamil. Tamil is spoken in Tamil Nadu, which has a population of 7 crore. Hindi is spoken by almost 100 crore Indians, either as the first language or as a second language, and even spoken in Pakistan. This is the reality, that Hindi is spoken by 15 times more people than Tamil. So it's not that Hindi is superior to Tamil, but due to certain historical reasons, it's spoken in large parts of the country, if not as the first language, then at least as a second language.
No, what I was trying to say was that it's not about the language per se. I think it's also got to do with this resentment of political domination by Hindi-speaking states.
There
Which
should be
comes
no
out in the form of
domination.
I'm
totally against domination.
The reality is there is.
If anybody tries to dominate, this country will break up. There's such tremendous diversity in India. So many religions, so many castes, so many languages, so many ethnic groups, so many regional groups. If you try to dominate this country, cannot survive. And please permit me to say so. The present this BJP government, by the policy of Hindutva, dominating over Muslims, lynching Muslims and atrocities on Muslims, this is going to break up the country. So I'm against domination, whether on the basis of religion or language or caste or anything. Everybody must be treated as equals.
Thank you very much. I would like to next invite Thiru Saravanan Annadurai, spokesperson for the Dravida Munnetra Kazhagam, to say his point of view. And again, the time limit is 10 minutes.
Yeah. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to be a part of this August group, people on a subject which is very close, or rather we can say the DNA of our party, opposing hegemony on any count, whatever it be, language or any form of oppression or hegemony is opposed by our party. And that is the founding principle of our party. And as rightly pointed out about the history, the Hindi imposition, see, it's like the first thing I want to clarify here is the fact that we are not against Hindi. This is not an anti-Hindi movement. This is an anti-Hindi imposition movement. I think most of them who are opposed to our viewpoint are taking this extreme view that DMK or people or the Dravidian parties from the state of Tamil Nadu is against Hindi. That is per se wrong. We have a Hindi Prachar Sabha. And every year, that was what the secretary of the Hindi Prachar Sabha is saying, that almost 2 to 3 lakh people are studying Hindi. So whoever wants to study Hindi of their own free will and volition, they can go ahead and do that at the Hindi Prachar Sabha, or they can have those day courses. They can go ahead and do that. Nobody is preventing them. And as also pointed out, the successful of all the Hindi movies, we are all fan of all Hindi movies, Hindi songs, and there are certain cinemas which are totally dedicated only for Hindi movies. We have seen successful movies those days running for 1 year. Tezab, Kayamat Se, Kayamat Tag, all those movies were ran for more than a year successfully in the state of Tamil Nadu. So it doesn't coexist with the notion that we are against Hindi. So now what is happening? Why this sudden focus on these language issues? This is because, see, Mr. Katju had clarified his stand, and it's very heartening to know that he's also part of the anti-Hindi imposition agitations. Very happy to hear that. First time we are hearing that. Congratulations, sir, for being a part of that historic movement. And he speaks about that, please learn Hindi because it will be helpful to move across the state. And he says, look at the number of people who speak Hindi. So just read Hindi. Respectfully, we would say that this is majoritarianism. Just because majority of the people do one thing or have a habit, you please follow that. We will not do that, sir. And you were also saying that you can learn it. Now, with the technological advancements, what we have. For example, I would like to quote what Mr. Modi, the Prime Minister, said in his Bear Grylls show. He was saying in a tweet, he was saying, you will all be wondering how I was communicating with Bear Grylls. I know Hindi. He does not know Hindi. We were having a device in the hand. When I was speaking Hindi, it was translating to English simultaneously with the technological advancements and everybody having a smartphone. I don't think language is a barrier anymore. And when we speak about language, when we speak about that a language should be learned because it will give you upliftment. If it gives me upliftment, if it is going to give me economic prospects, if I'm going to be more advanced, my lifestyle is going to improve, my economic status is going to improve, my social status is going to improve, definitely I will read that language. But will Hindi offer that thing to us? Can anybody become a doctor, an engineer, or a scientist knowing Hindi? No. Then why should I read Hindi? I am happy with this 2-language formula, with the language what I already know, Tamil and English. Everything is there in English. See, this problem, this disadvantage of no scientific regional languages is hurting. Probably if we want to promote regional languages, if we think that Tamil should be there for another 2000 years, then we should start thinking about making scientific literature in regional languages. There is no impetus for that. If impetus for that grows, then I would say that all the regional languages would grow. Right now in India, nobody can become a doctor, as I pointed out. So that disadvantage has to be removed. Then, right now, why this debate and why this thing? And Mr. Katju was referring to the incident which was meted out to our deputy leader of the parliament, Madam Kanimozhi, that she asked, "Are you Indian? You don't Hindi? Are you an Indian?" These kind of questions have started arising only of late, probably in the last 5 years. This has never happened. This kind of Hindi chauvinism was never there probably 10 years back or 15 years back. Now all this is coming to light. People are being emboldened to question. You don't know Hindi? Are you an Indian? This emboldenment is coming out because of the Hindi majoritarian politics of BJP party. When we say BJP is promoting Hindi, we have for that. In the last budget, 60 crore is allocated by BJP to recruit Hindi teachers or having those Hindi teachers in states where they do not know Hindi. They do not speak Hindi as their mother tongue. What does this signify? This signifies that the BJP wants to promote Hindi with the disadvantage of the other languages and leaving out the other languages. And in the previous budgets, 65 crores in 17-18 for promotion of Hindi as an official language. It raised to 75 crores in 18-19. 2020, I'm not sure of the details. So definitely it would have been say around 90 crores or 100 crores. When the entire country is paying the tax and special treatment is meted out to Hindi and Sanskrit, spent on Sanskrit for the last 3 years is 640 crores. Along with Sanskrit, there are 6 other classical languages in our country. Tamil, Kannada, Oriya, Malayalam, Telugu, all of them are classical languages. And how much money is being spent on these classical languages? Those are just 29 crores. So on Sanskrit, you have 640 crores. And on Tamil, you have 29 crores. When these things come out, this raises resentment because Tamil Nadu is one of the states which pays higher tax, a huge tax. And when we speak about population and when we speak about that more number of people are speaking Hindi, definitely Tamil would also had more number of, if we had not followed population control, or people from North India, the central government promoted family planning. We followed it very, very diligently. We followed it. So we were curtailing our population. But in Uttar Pradesh, in Bihar, in Jharkhand, is that happening? It's not happening. So should we be penalized for this non-following of this family planning methods by the other states? And again, there's a time bomb ticking. I think we'll have to be debate. I think it's going to be a very, very contentious issue when the 2026 delimitation is going to happen. When that happens, I think all hell will break loose because they're going to delimit the constituencies based on the population in 2026. I think unless we have a formula like what's happening in America, the American Electoral College in India, it's going to be very difficult. Every other state except Uttar Pradesh will become insignificant. They will have no say in the politics of India, like how this is happening with the BJP's Hindi majoritarian policies. So we'll have to be very vigilant on this. And when they speak about, when all these people say that what we are doing is politics, this is not politics. This is about our identity. Language is the biggest marker of the identity. You cannot differentiate the language and the cultural identity of the people. When you are saying, when you want to impose Hindi on us, it means you are making a frontal attack on our culture, on our identity. We are very, very proud of our culture, very proud of our heritage. We are Tamilians first, then Indians. Of course, we are proud Indians, but we are proud Tamil-speaking Indians, like how they say African Americans, all those things, and Latin Americans, even though they are all American citizens. And let us not forget the fact that Indian Union, all the states formed the Indian Union. So this war. We would call this war because we are being assaulted slyly by the BJP. Now they're very, very strong enough, and they are strengthened by their numbers in the parliament and subjugation of all the institutions, constitutional institutions. They want to promote Hindi. They want to subjugate everybody else. And why we are opposing this Hindi imposition is this. We don't want to learn Hindi unless it is imminently necessary, because if everybody learns Hindi, let's say Tamil Nadu has a policy of a 3-language policy, or we are actively promoting Hindi in the state of Tamil Nadu. What happens is everybody in Tamil Nadu knows Hindi. But can they beat people from North India who has Hindi, however scholarly I may be? But I will certainly be at a disadvantage when I'm competing with someone from Uttar Pradesh. That is why our great leader Perarinjar Anna said, please, when you start using Hindi as a link language, you will be creating a class of citizens. The first class citizens who know Hindi, and the second class citizens who speak Hindi, for whom Hindi is not their mother tongue. And that is why we have been opposing Hindi imposition so long. And Mr. Katju, with great respect to him, is also speaking about how people in Bihar, Rajasthan, Maharashtra, all those places, they said how they were able to speak Hindi. They were able to adapt to Hindi, so it became easy for them. But let us not forget the crucial fact that their culture, their language were totally destroyed. Maithili, Budalkandi, a lot of other languages, Bhojpuri, Awadhi, Rajasthani, Marathi, all those languages, all those cultures were destroyed. They are no more in existence because Hindi, like an octopus, engulfed them. We don't want such a situation, such a thing to happen. And that is why we are fiercely protecting our identity. We are fiercely protecting this onslaught. We are against this onslaught of Hindi imposition. And this is being being made a focus only because of this chauvinistic policies of the BJP. If not, we were part of, the DMK was part of the UPA until 2012-13. Of course, Hindi, there was a push for Hindi, but this kind of direct and indirect imposition was never there. We were able to stall that. But right now, we don't have any leverage in the central government. That is why coalition governments, they say that coalition governments are unstable. But look what's happening to India because of a majoritarian government. We had demonetization, we had several other disasters, and look at the response for Corona. And look at how skewed the money is being spent. There is an election in Bihar, a special package for Bihar. There is an election in West Bengal, a special package for West Bengal. The packages or whatever that is being given by the central government is not proportionate to the needs of states. So the problem here is, right now, ailing India is some. And that is why we say with a firm voice, avoid majorities, be who we are. We'll be very happy. We are proud. We are all proud Indians, and we take pride in the age-old adage, unity in diversity. The diversity, but BJP does not want diversity. It oneness, one nation, one SIM card, one everything. That is the problem. And they want to impose one language. We are not willing to listen to you. We will oppose it to the nail. And this sums up our opposition to this Hindi imposition. And once again, at the risk of repetition, I state we are not against Hindi. We are against Hindi imposition at any form, in any manner. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for a very forceful intervention. And that raises a question before we go on to the next speaker. I would like to ask, based on what another just now said, two questions to Justice Katju quickly. One is that, are there any states in northern India which learn any South Indian languages? I think in Haryana, there was an experiment under Devilal to teach Telugu in government schools. But other than that, I don't see any interest in northern India to learn languages from other parts of India. So, what do you think of that? Second is, do you think that aside from the issue of Hindi, this political domination of Uttar Pradesh as a huge, massive state with a huge population, with too many members of parliament, and extremely feudal and backward, dominating such a big country like India, do you think that there can be something done to reduce this disproportionate power of Uttar Pradesh on India's politics? Like dividing Uttar Pradesh into 4 states or something like that?
As far as UP is concerned, I am from UP, although originally from Kashmir, but I've lived almost all my life in UP. I can tell you people from UP are very liberal. A Tamilian can come there, he is accepted. I'm a Kashmiri, I came there, I was accepted. People from Bihar have come, nobody is refused. I mean, they're not chauvinistic. Totally liberal, everybody is accommodated in UP. I can tell you that about UP. As regards learning South Indian language, let me tell you one thing. Of course, learn as when, but the problem is this. Learning a new language takes about 2 years if you want to learn it properly. There are 25 languages in this country. Now, are you going to spend 50 years of your life learning languages and doing nothing else? So,
No, at least
learn
one
the
language,
language, but let me complete, please. Learn the language which is widely spoken, because that way of use, from the practical point of view, if you learn Hindi, you can go, I mean, it will be of help to you in 75-80% of India. It is spoken. Tamil is spoken only by 7 crore people. Learn Tamil. I myself learned a bit of Tamil when I was Chief Justice of Madras High Court and when I was a student of Annamalai University. But you can't learn Tamil and Kannada and Gujarati and Marathi and learn 25 languages. You can't do it. It takes 2 years to learn a language. I know I spent 2 years doing a Tamil course in Annamalai University. I spent 2 years. So I know how, for me, it was very difficult initially. I gradually, at one time I could speak Tamil, now I've got rusted. But you can't learn all the languages of India. But Hindi is spoken almost by 75-80% people of India in either their first language or second language. Kashmiris know it. Originally I am from Kashmir. Kashmiri language is totally different from Hindi. But every Kashmiri also knows Hindi. Every Naga also knows Hindi. Bengali knows it. Gujarati knows it. Marathi knows it. Punjabi knows it. Telangana, of course, they know it because it was in Nizam Dominion. Their language was Urdu, which is the same as Hindi. So it is only a matter of convenience from the practical point of view. Otherwise, I told you, I am even more against imposition of Hindi than you are. You people only talk against imposition of Hindi. I have done it in deeds. Has Mr. Annadurai ever done a march from Annamalai University to Chidambaram shouting Hindi ode hai and then blackening the Hindi signs on the railway platform? I have done it. Although it is my mother tongue, I have done it. In 67, 68, when the anti-Hindi agitation was at its peak. So this is my basic principle that nobody should dominate over anybody, either from the point of view religion or language or caste or region or ethnicity. There must be no if we want to keep our country together. Equal respect must be given to everybody. And I would like to tell Mr. Annadurai, he is totally mistaken that Bhojpuri has been destroyed. I know in UP, in the Banaras, I go there very often. People speak Bhojpuri. Many of my friends speak Bhojpuri, and in Western Bihar they speak Bhojpuri. It has not been destroyed. That's not correct.
Thank you. But I think this is Katju. We are not. I don't think any of the speakers are questioning your personal position, which I think everybody respects. The question is a larger question about the reality of India, where certain parts of India and certain language of those parts of India tends to dominate. As Tirunadarai very well put it, that the amount of allocation of resources to Hindi far outweighs allocation by the government to all other languages put together. So there is a feeling that there is an unfairness here. It's
I
not
agree
about,
with you. I agree with you. I'm opposed to that. I told you again and again, it's one of my basic principles of my philosophy that if India is to hold together, everybody should be given equal respect and treated equally. Otherwise, this country will break up. It has such tremendous diversity. I think no country in the world has such diversity as India. And the only way to keep it together is by giving equal respect to people of whatever religion, whatever language, whatever race, whatever caste, whatever ethnicity. You have to give equal respect to everybody.
But do you think equal respect is being given right now in India?
Well, I think from the religious point of view, this BJP government is not giving equal respect to Muslims. It is lynching of Muslims, atrocities on Muslims. So many Muslims are arrested on trumped up charges, fabricated charges, that like that Dr. Kafil Khan and that pregnant Kashmiri woman, Safura Zardar, who were kept in jail for long periods. So equal respect is not being given, but that is on the religious basis.
But also in language, no?
Language, I don't see.
That's the feeling here, I mean.
Even, pardon if you Tamilians don't mind my saying so. You keep talking about Hindi imposition. I don't see any Hindi imposition. Yes, it was sought to be imposed in the 1960s, and I participated in that movement against that. Presently, I don't think this 3-language formula. It is only a suggestion. It is not obligatory. And what I was told by some Tamilians, that the Tamilian politicians will send their children to private schools where Hindi is compulsory, so that you will make your own children learn Hindi, because you know it is in his interest to learn Hindi. You will send your children to private schools where Hindi is taught, but you give lectures to others, oppose Hindi imposition. So you don't practice what you preach. You will make sure that your child learns Hindi, you politician. And this is what I was told by a Tamilian gentleman. I don't know whether he's coming on the show. I'd asked him to come on the show.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. We'll go to the next speaker, Tora Katju, who is the General Secretary of the Tamil National Liberation Movement. And he's well known in Tamil Nadu and elsewhere as the translator of Karl Marx' Das Kapital from English to Tamil. Next speaker is Tora Katju.
Thank you, Satya, and thank you, all the friends. I'm thankful to the organizers for giving me this opportunity to express my views on this question. You have spoken about the anti-Hindi war 2-0. Historically speaking, it is 3-0. Our first language war was even before independence. In 1938, when the then Prime Minister of the Madras province, Rajagopalacharya, tried to impose Hindi as a language in schools, and Tandai Periyar and other Tamil leaders opposed it, and actually there was a great struggle, upsurge of Tamil feeling. There was even a long march from Viluppuram to Chennai, Trichy to Chennai. And it was on September 11th, the slogan was raised at the end of the agitation, Tamil Nadu for Tamis, Tamil Nadu Tamilarike, which slogan was being repeated by Tandai Periyar until his last breath. Then the second war, as Mr. Katju, Justice Katju, referred to in his stint at the Annamalai University, that was his second language war. But was the first after the Constitution of India came into being. So that DMK under Anna was continuously opposed to Part 17 of the Constitution, particularly Article 343. Under Article 343, 1965, on January 26, 1965, Hindi was to be enthroned as the sole official language. But the DMK was continuously agitating, opposing Hindi imposition in this form. In 1963, we had the Official Languages Act, by which there was an assurance given by Nehru, and the act said English may continue as long as the non-Hindi speaking people want it to continue. So that was made as associate official language. The official language is still now Hindi, and the associate official language is English. Whether the Congress or the BJP, whichever the party is at the Delhi ruling circle, whether it is the NDA or the UPA, the same constitution is there. The 1965 education was against this constitution. They wanted this part 17 to be amended suitably. And actually they burnt copies of this part 17 of the constitution. The anti-Hindi agitation was actually a spontaneous struggle. The DMK had announced a black flag hoisting on January 26, but the students came into the streets on January 25 itself. Kalimuthu and Kamarasan, they burnt a copy of the Constitution, part 17 of the Constitution in Madurai itself. That was the outbreak of the struggle. It continued for more than 50 days. We lost nearly 500 lives. The then Congress government shot down various students and people. It was a bloodbath. The Indian military was brought to Tamil Nadu. That was for the first time we suffered curfew and other oppressions. And this is a position. From 1967, the parties which opposed Hindi imposition have been in the power throne as far as Tamil Nadu is concerned. Both the DMK and ADMK, they even now celebrate the annual Martyrs Day on January 25. But they have forgotten about this part 17. They have also been part of the central power also. As my friend from the DMK said, they were part of the UPA for more than 10 years. But I don't know a single instance when they opposed this part 17 of the Constitution, made any constructive efforts to convince their Congress friends about this Hindi imposition, constitutional imposition. See, please don't confuse this issue with whether learning a language is good or bad, learning more languages give us more scope or not. That's not the question at all. I am one who learnt my Hindi from the Hindi Prachar Sabha. When I entered college in 1967, the DMK came to power. Under the DMK itself, even in the government colleges, the second language was optional. You can leave Tamil and take Hindi or Sanskrit or French or something else. But English was compulsory. English and then language. Even now, language means Tamil or some other language. English is compulsory. This language policy, which is called the two-language policy, which is, in other words, equating the mother tongue with a foreign language. For me, Hindi is an alien language. English is equally an alien language. Not because I cannot read it, I cannot learn it, not because I don't want to learn it. I would like to learn any number of languages if there is a need. But if don't have a need, that is not necessary. The general public education system, it should have Tamil as the mother tongue. What has happened in Tamil Nadu is this two-language policy have destroyed our education. Even now in corporation schools, they teach English medium, not Tamil medium. They teach English. There is imposition of a foreign language. Even now, our engineering colleges, medical colleges, they have English as the medium of instruction. Not only here, but even in high schools, they are imposing. Mr. Nadaraj spoke about the matriculation, Kendriya Vidyalaya and CBSE schools. All those are imposing English and Hindi. English may be there as a second language, but it should only be optional. We will be benefited if we can be benefited by a language like Hindi in India, we can also be benefited by learning Mandarin, which is spoken by more number of people in the world. So we can learn French. I can learn German to study Marx. I can learn Spanish to study Guevara and Castro. So we can have a multilingual society. There are two misconceptions about the language policy. One is it is being confused with the desirability or necessity of learning languages. The desirability or necessity of learning languages is different from accepting the hegemony of one language. Justice Katju spoke about equality. Does the Constitution give equal status to Tamil and English? There are 22 languages in the schedule, but the composition in the Constitution imposes only Hindi as the official language and a foreign language, English, as the associate official language. The outlook of Tamil nationalism is different from those parties which want to share power, which want to enjoy power within this constitutional setup. Anna called it Hindi imperialism. Anna called it Delhi imperialism. You want Tamil Nadu to be a colony of Delhi imperialism, whether the Congress or the BJP. This new education policy wants to complete the process. Somebody said it is speaking about the mother tongue education. What do they say? Wherever possible. These are the two poisonous words in that particular class. Wherever possible. So is it possible in the Kendriya schools? Is it possible in the CBSE schools? Is it possible in the matriculation schools? Is it possible in the schools run by our politicians all over Tamil Nadu, private schools, international schools, and all those schools? No, they say it is not possible. They impose Hindi and English. They actually treat Tamil as only a third, not only as a third language, and a third-rate language. We want Tamil to live. We want Tamil to rule in Tamil Nadu, not all over India. We want Tamil to be here. They say we have granted the status of the classical language. It is already there. It's a classical language, whether you grant a status or not. Why do you equate it with the dead language, with the other languages? It is a classical language, most classical of classical languages. It is not a question. It is just like putting a golden shawl on a man who is hungry. I want my children to learn Tamil. I want my children to learn through Tamil. Tamil should be the medium of instruction. It should be the compulsory medium of instruction in all schools, whether run by private or in public, whether run by CBSE or SBSE. I don't care. Tamil should be compulsory. As French is the compulsory medium of instruction in France. England is the compulsory medium of instruction in Britain. You say India is a different country. That may be that. But I am only a Tamilian. My history is, my identity is of being a Tamil. I was not a British Indian when the British ruled over me. I need not be an Indian just because India is ruling over me. It is an imperialist state. So the question is connected with the question of national liberation, national right to self-determination, etc. You speak of three-language formula. Do you have three languages, three official languages in India? No. You speak of the three-language formula. Do you have three languages in the Supreme Court and the High Court? In the Supreme Court and High Court, English is the only medium. A foreign language is ruling over the Supreme Court and High Court in a free India. What do you call it free? Why? There is some class content to using a foreign language against native languages in this country. What about Article 348? Was Tamil allowed to be at least a language of the proceedings even after unanimous resolution by the Tamil Nadu State Assembly? They didn't allow it. They allowed only Hindi in Hindi-speaking states to be a language of the proceedings of the court in the Hindi states only. Why? We are being discriminated against. It's a kind of apartheid against the Tamil people. This problem can be solved not through capturing power or sharing power with other parties. Because, as I said, you cannot amend the Indian Constitution. Anna could not do it. He was again speaking against the Constitution. Sampath got an assurance from Nehru himself. But could he convince the ruling powers to amend the Constitution? No. Nearly 550 members are there. From Tamil Nadu, we can select only 39 or 40. How can this 39 and 40 get a 2/3 majority in parliament and implement its language policy, whether it is 2 language or, as I say, 1 language policy? No, there is no way. As far as India is there, Hindi will be imposed. Whoever may be the ruling party or ruling alliance, that is a fact of the matter. I want you people to please address the question of the Constitution, the issue of the Constitution. Can you give me a solution to amend the Constitution, to give the status of official language, all India status of official language to Tamil and all the 22 languages listed in the schedule? If we cannot do it, just giving us advice, yes, you learn Hindi, you also speak other languages, those people will welcome you. That's all useless. We are not begging for anything from anybody. We want Tamil to have the status of not only the national language, but the official language, language of education, language of the courts. Yengum Tamil, Yedilum Tamil. Wherever there is an opportunity, Tamil should be there. That is the demand of the Tamils. If there is going to be a 3rd language war, or as you call the anti-Hindi war 2.0, it won't stop with just the language of education. It won't stop with just selecting some other party as a ruling party. It will go to the end, to the logical end of asserting our right to national determination. That is a way to give language the pride of place. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Tiago. Very powerful points. We will come back to this theme later in the question answer session. In the interest of time, I would like to move on to the next speaker, which is Mohan Kumaramangalam, working president of the Tamil Nadu Congress Party. If you can keep your talk to 10 minutes. Thank you.
Sure, Mr. Sivaraman. So a lot of the points that I wanted to make actually have been taken up by my colleague, Mr. Saravanan from the DMK, and I think reiterated also to some extent by Mr. Tyagyu. So let me start by a brief introduction about my background. So I grew up in a household where my mother spoke Hindi and Punjabi, my father spoke Tamil, my grandmother spoke Bengali, and my great-grandmother was actually Kannadiga from Mangalore. So I wonder what my identity would be if the language I spoke or one particular culture in India that I followed would be used to define my identity. Let me first address what Justice Katju was saying about there being no Hindi imposition as far as he can tell. And I think while it's not happening directly, it is happening surreptitiously, which is the funding, as Saravanan pointed out, of classical languages is heavily weighed towards Sanskrit and then Sanskritized Hindi, almost by a ratio of 22:1. It's also very implicitly used as a default language of linking us together. And I wasn't aware of this, frankly, growing up, because while I was born in Chennai and I spent the first 6 or 7 years of my life in Chennai, I moved with my father to Delhi and ended up learning Hindi as well. So when I traveled around the country, when I saw things displayed in Hindi, Hindi being repeated along with the local language in that area, sometimes not with the local language in that particular state, it wasn't immediately evident to me that Hindi is sort of understatedly being used as a link language. But now, once I've come and I've spent a lot more time in Tamil Nadu over the last decade or so, and I understand what is being talked about and thought about in Tamil Nadu, it is very clear to me that Hindi is sort of subliminally being used as a link language in many different places. Justice Katju also spoke about the language of trade. And in this case, I must point out that I'm in Bangalore right now. I'm a renewable energy entrepreneur as well. And I have a biomass plant in Mandya where not a single person who works in my plant can speak anything but Kannada. So it's very interesting when you say that people around the country outside of Tamil Nadu are aware of at least working Hindi. In Bangalore, my Tamil actually helps me much more than my Hindi does. And it's also something that I've noticed in the South, which might be a factor of the, of geographical setting and distance, that neighboring states would tend to do more trade. And therefore, I find many people in southern states knowing each other's languages and being able to converse in those languages better than they can in Hindi. So I find a lot of people in Karnataka who will speak Tamil really well, or who will speak even Telugu really well. And similarly in Chennai, much better than they can speak in Hindi. I find the taxi driver example also a bit simplistic, I would say, because I've seen that for the purpose of trade, the working knowledge of the language required at the place, at the destination where trade has to happen, is almost always picked up. So I have a lot of friends, in fact, from Tiruchengodu, which is my hometown. There are borewell rigs that go as far as Madhya Pradesh and go around the country. In fact, they're famous around the country as the best people to call if you want to dig a borewell, actually. So they've had no problem without knowing any amount of Hindi to actually go and expand their trade beyond our borders. Similarly, as someone mentioned before me, workers are coming from all across the country. They're coming from Orissa, Chhattisgarh, UP, Bihar to Tamil Nadu. And while we are also talking about, we are also conversing with them in Hindi to some extent to bridge the gap, all of them have become fluent in Tamil. You cannot even tell the difference between a native Tamil speaker and them. So I find that the excuse of, it is going to be useful in trade is not one that's valid. The problem that really is happening in our country today is, and I will say that Hindi is being used, not really because they just want to impose it on us, because they want everybody to speak the same language, but it is often used as an argument of building a feeling of nationalism. The argument that's used a lot is that, India is a young country. We have very few symbols of nationalism and very few occasions that we can come together as a nation. Often that's, for a cricket match where we're all supporting the country together, or often that's, around movies that we all watch together and appreciate together. So the building a feeling of nationalism would be easier if we all were speaking the same language. And therefore, English is often treated as, oh, this is a foreign language. There is no way that we can use it to become the center of our identity or define our identity, so to speak. But I find that logic inherently flawed, because as a nation, we came together, and the entire ethos, even of Hinduism, I would say, is of respecting diversity and finding unity in that diversity. So in my opinion, actually using English as a link language is probably the best thing for all states together. And there is no reason why a UP or a Bihar can actually do a better job at teaching some of their population the English language, which in Tamil Nadu also we need to do a better job on. I mean, today the argument is happening in some way. You could say it is based out of it is a little bit of politicking happening around the argument. But at the same time, I think that Tamil Nadu has to be focused on issues like in 2019, our education system in Tamil Nadu was rated second grade. It was only Gujarat and Kerala that made it to the first grade once we started looking at outcomes. Those are the issues that we actually need to be discussing in the public sphere versus Hindi imposition or not. That is my personal concern there. But this whole Hindutva, if you will, if I could stretch that argument, is the reason why people are feeling so insecure. The last point I want to make is this is about teaching Hindi in schools, not out of school, not as a third language that someone wants to voluntarily learn. And there, if you look at global benchmarks around how language is taught, much of Europe is actually a single domestic language. I mean, those countries are organized around one language, so it's easier to do that. But if you take, India being sort of like the European Union, a number of small, tiny countries in Europe, it is their home language, and then English as the link language. That is also optional. If you take Singapore, for example, let's move away from Europe and come to Singapore. When Singapore was being formed, when it attained independence, and when the country was being formed, Lee Kuan Yew had this choice of actually making Mandarin as the number one language or the majority language. There, 80% of Singapore was formed by the Chinese. Then there were Malays, Tamils, and other people, but 80% were Chinese. Here we have barely 50% speaking Hindi. He chose not to do that. He chose to have education in the mother tongue, as well as allowing English to be the link language for his entire country. And I actually find that to be a very good model to follow. So pragmatism aside, I think practically speaking also, I found that people who need a working knowledge will actually get through with Hindi. It's not something. As an aspect of pedagogy, you'll have to see that if people are learning 3 languages while they're growing up, is this causing unnecessary stress to the student, or is this in any way beneficial to the student growing up? The point I want to make there also, while I was giving you global examples, is when I was working as an engineer in the US, I remember a very dear friend of mine was from Pakistan, and he spoke lovely Urdu, and his wife was Russian. And they had a child, and I remember when going in their house, I would see the child speak almost with great comfort, switching between both Urdu and Russian while talking to both his parents. And I also, the reason I'm bringing that point is that just education at home will never make you proficient or never make you pick up a language beyond a point. It might only give you merely a working knowledge of that particular language. So if we say, okay, we are going to admit to what, or we're going to acquiesce to what the central government wants us to do, I don't think by any measure that any of us will become proficient in Hindi if we merely learn it in school. So I think that again is sort of a misnomer. It is unnecessary stress that we're putting on our students at this time, and we're not doing it for any larger benefit. So I think that is the sum total of my argument. I've of course added to a lot of the things that my dear friend Saravanan also said. I want to make one last point, and this is that I have found what's most damaging to our country is this politics of identity. So here's where I might differ from Saravanan to some extent, which is that I think even from the time of Aringya Ranna, I think the politics of ideas is what predominated our intellectual landscape. That is what was essentially what we were talking about. And we've moved heavily into the politics of identity now, where caste is used as an identity to gather vote banks, language and race is used as an identity. So when I started off saying that what my identity is, and how I define myself, given that I come from such a multicultural household, if you will, is that I choose to define my identity by what I'm doing and what I'm producing and what I'm giving to my society. So while today it might be that I'm an entrepreneur and I'm employing some people, as well as I'm helping the Congress party by working as their executive president, earlier it was that I was an engineer, and that was my identity. What I built while being an engineer was my identity. And that's something that I want to leave all of you with, is that while I respect that all of us have unique cultures and unique identities, I think that shouldn't be, my feeling is at least, not our primary identity. What we give to society, what we build, what we are doing, that should be something that we take pride in over and above the accident of our birth. And with that, I'll hand it back to the moderator. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Thiru Kumaramangalam, for a very important point made that there is no one identity that defines anybody. People carry multiple identities as professionals, as brothers, parents, neighbors, out of their own interests, as part of language groups. And I think it's an important point because that's how naturally people are. They have multiple identities, but they're boxed into specific identities because of political compulsions, whether it's religious identity or caste identity or linguistic identity. But in the context of India, Justice Katju, a quick question before we move on, is to say India is a country that was put together by the East India Company, the modern Indian state. I mean, it's not a very old country. There are many countries here. And that's a point that comes up in many of the discussions, particularly in Tamil Nadu, which has a history of asserting its sovereignty, so to speak, in many ways. So India is a very new country, and English is a linked language because the English built India. So in that sense, there's nothing wrong with it. And English is a powerful language. It's an international language. And just as you said that Tamil politicians send their children to learn Hindi, Hindi politicians send their children to learn English while promoting Hindi. That's also true. So what do you think of see, there are two views here. The Hindutva view is that India is an ancient land, that India was born 3,000, 5,000 years ago. But then there was no India at that time in the modern sense. Today, constitutionally run India is 70 years old. As an administrative unit, it came up under the British, under the English. This is one question. The second question is, there is an argument in the north of India, and part of it was referred to by Annadurai, that Hindi is imposed on the people of North India also. In Uttar Pradesh itself, there are many languages, but a particular kind of Hindi. And I know that you are opposed to this Sanskritized Hindi, but the Sanskritized Hindi is the official Hindi. It is the Hindi that is being, the budget goes to that kind of Hindi. The Hindi committees that go around checking whether people are learning Hindi or not, they check to see if that particular Sanskritized Hindi is learned. And there are so many languages in the north of India, where the tragedy is that the people of northern India, in Bihar and UP and MP and Rajasthan, their children are not getting to learn, go to school and learn in their own mother tongues because Hindi is imposed on them. If you could give a quick reaction.
No, there are two things I want to say here. Firstly, when I was a judge of Allahabad High Court, the High Court Bar Association every year celebrates Hindi Divas or Hindi Day. It is in October or November. And the Bar Association people used to come to my chamber to invite me to that function held in the evening after court hours. And I would tell them, look, don't invite me because when I come there, I will say something which will upset you. What is the point? But they would insist, no, my lord, please come. I said, well, okay, I'll come, but I will speak what is in my mind. When I would go there, huge crowd of lawyers of High Court. And many of them shouting, many of them are Hindi fanatics, shouting, Hindi bhagao, Angrezi hatao, all this. And when my turn came to speak, I said, look, if you don't want your child to become a bullock cart driver, you must teach him English because English is the language of science. If you go to any engineering college, all the books are in English. If you go to any medical college, all the books are in English. And I said, here in your Bar Association library, look around, all the books are in English. If you go to any lawyer's chamber, all his books are in English. Your son will only be fit to drive bullock carts if he does not learn English. So don't talk this nonsense, Angrezi hatao, and you're talking rubbish. Hindi is my mother tongue. I love Hindi, but I'm not a fool to say drive out English. It is the language of science and you can't do without English. So that is one. Secondly, when you spoke about, let me tell you a little about Hindi and what is really simple Hindi, Hindustani. It is really the language of the cities. Now in Allahabad, where I lived most of my life, in the Allahabad city, the common man speaks Hindustani, but around the city, in the villages, they speak a dialect called Avdi, which I would learn from the children of the servants I used to mix with, I picked up, but it's a little different from the Hindustani spoken in the cities. Bhojpuri, which was mentioned by Mr. Annadurai, again, these are rural dialects. In the cities in North India, same language is being spoken. You go to Bihar, in Patna, any city of Bihar, in the city, the language is Hindustani, simple Hindi. But in the rural areas, for example, there are at least 5 dialects in Bihar, like Maghai, Maithili, and so on. If you go to Rajasthan, in the cities, there's the same simple Hindi being spoken, but in Western Rajasthan, they speak Marwari dialect, which a Hindi speaker will not be able to understand. In southern Rajasthan, they speak Mewari dialect, which a Hindi speaker will not be able to understand. Of course, that Mewari speaker or Marwari speaker also speaks Hindi. You go to Madhya Pradesh, there are so many. So what I mean to say, in the rural areas, the dialects are different and you will not be able to understand. For example, you can't understand Bhojpuri or Maithili or Maghai or Mewari. But in the cities, the same language is being spoken. And this is so because a huge common market had developed in large parts of India even before the coming of the Mughals. So that it was a language of trade. The seller and purchaser had to know a common language for the sale and purchase to take place. So that is how Hindi developed. By Hindi, I mean Hindustani, simple Hindi. So what I mean to say is, listen, it is your choice. If you think my argument makes sense, learn it. If you think it doesn't make sense, don't learn it. See, you must learn a language which is widely spoken. English is spoken very widely in the world. A son of a friend of mine went to study agricultural science in Japan. He told me in Japan, humanities are taught in Japanese language, but science is taught in English in Japan. This is what I was told. So English is the language. You must learn English. You can't do without English. But in addition, I would recommend also learn Hindi. Of course, I love Tamil. I'm one of you. I told you I fought for you people. You people only talk about it, about opposing Hindi imposition. I've done it by practical deeds. So, of course, Tamil has a great literature, the Sangam literature, very great literature. I have read Sirupati Haram and what is that, Tirupavai and all. I have actually read. I used to quote them often. I've quoted in Supreme Court. When I was a judge of Supreme Court, I used to tell Tamilian lawyers, there are a lot of Tamilian lawyers in Supreme Court. When he would come, I would say, Tamil le solunga. I would tell the lawyer to speak in Tamil. Although in the constitution only English is prescribed, but I would encourage Tamil. I was one and only judge in Supreme Court who has introduced Tamil in the portals of the Supreme Court. So please understand this. Now is your choice. I've given my arguments. If it makes sense, accept it. If it don't make sense, don't accept. Who am I? I'm not imposing it. Who am I to impose it? But I've said that Hindi is spoken very widely in India. Even Pakistani speak it. It is the language of this, linked language of this subcontinent, not just India. If this reasoning is not acceptable to you, reject it. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There's no misunderstanding. We all respect you very much and we agree with your views. I think the problem is a much larger one beyond your views because there are other processes happening in India. Anyway, we'll go to the next speaker, Thiru Karthik Chelvan, coordinator of the Tamizhmeetchi Pasarai Naam Tamilar Katchi.
Hello everyone, thank you for this opportunity. I am representing the Naam Tamilar Katchi here. So first of all, we appreciate Katju's, Justice Katju's point of view that he is just recommending us to learn Hindi. If you look at it, even the Prime Minister Modi says, Tamil is the oldest language in the world. He said it in the IIT Madras speech. He also once said that you can know the richness of the Indian culture and tradition from the Tamil language. On the other hand, a spokesperson, I think the BJP youth wing head, Vinod Selvam, he mentioned if you don't know Hindi, go to Pakistan. That comment was made very recently. So these kind of statements, on one side, Prime Minister Modi is talking so high of Tamil. On the other side, a party's representative is speaking like this. If you don't know Hindi, go to Pakistan. So this is what creates this resentment here. Wherever people are oppressed, definitely you will see agitation there. And as Thoda Tyagu rightly mentioned, this is not the second anti-Hindi war. It is probably at least the third or fourth. The first war, as he rightly mentioned, was in 1937 when Rajaji came into power. He implemented compulsory Hindi in schools. When the whole Tamil nation rose up against it. And I would have felt happy when Thoda Tyagu mentioned the names of the people who took up that agitation. Maraimalai Adigal is the poet and the scholar at that time who initiated that, along with Somasundara Bharadiyar and the K.P. Vishwanathan. And at the later stage only, Periyar joined that movement. So I just wanted to correct that fact there. And the second anti-Hindi war, at least in a small level, happened in 1948 to 50, when Oman Durar was the chief minister of the then Madras presidency. Again, Hindi was being implemented as a compulsory language in the schools. Again, Tamil Nadu rose up against it. We also lost some lives in that. And then the biggest agitation happened in after the 63 bill was passed. 64 to 65, it was at its peak. So after that, again, in 68 and 86, there have been small agitations at a small level. But again, what is the need for us now, again, to rise up against this Hindi imposition? So the basic point is, if you remember back in 2014, after the BJP government came into power, there was a circular sent to the ministries to have their communication in Hindi. If people don't know Hindi, both English and Hindi, but give Hindi the preference. So when these kind of things happen, and we continuously see the Prime Minister of India talking to the nation, right, through the Man Ki Baat, and he speaks only in Hindi. And a lot of the ministries and the officials have been told to keep the mode of communication, even in social media, as Hindi. And a lot of things are being published in Hindi. Now, why do we need to learn Hindi? Based on Justice Katju's point, if you move out of Tamil Nadu, it is difficult for you. I just wanted to look at the statistics as well. I did some search. I found the 2011 census of the government, which says only 45% of India speaks Hindi, and only 25% of that's 25% of all of India, Hindi is the mother tongue. To give the numbers, Hindi speaking, that's mother tongue as the first language, is about 32 crores. If you look at it, 75% of the country speaks some other language other than Hindi. That in certain languages similar to Hindi, like Maithili, Bhojpuri, and all that. There are languages like Haryanvi, Korta, where about Haryanvi is spoken by 98 lakh people. Korta is being spoken about 80 lakhs of people. What are the measures taken by the government to promote or preserve these languages? Okay, we understand. To Justice Katju's point, when Saravanan mentioned about other languages not are completely being dominated by Hindi, they still exist. We agree. Maithili exists, Bhojpuri exists. But tell me honestly, how much of literature is being done today in those languages? What is the contribution of those languages in different aspects of arts and other related stuff? When this is what language is, not just a medium or mode of communication. It is much more. It's a culture. It's a tradition. So when you take away that, eventually, if not today, Maithili and Bhojpuri will die someday, which is what we Tamils do not want to happen to Tamil. And Tamil, as you all know, has a very, very rich tradition, very rich literature, probably the most literature in the whole country than any other languages, including Sanskrit. Sangam literature, which is about 2000 years old. So that's the base I want to set for this debate. And then if you look at it, you need a common language for India. You certainly need a common language with the world as well. When we have English, and when the northern states also teach English in their schooling, why don't you use that as a linked language, a communicative language? As Anna said back in the 60s, why do you need a small door for the small dog and a big door for a big dog? Just build the big door, let both the dogs use that. That's the point. And if you look at it, the other point people make is, I will come to education, but then the job prospects. It improves the job prospects. It improves the economy. This is the kind of a statement that's being made time and again whenever they impose Hindi. I also looked up some statistics on this. If you look at the Economic Survey of India, 2017, page 268 gives the data. Most people migrating out of one particular state, that is happening, I will give you in the order. Most people migrating out of a state is Uttar Pradesh, then Bihar, then Rajasthan, then Madhya Pradesh. All are predominantly Hindi-speaking states. If it is improving job aspects, job prospect, or improving the economy, why are people moving out of your state? Isn't there a bigger problem for you to deal with? So that is what we'll have to look at. And if you compare that statistics, southern states are on the bottom part of it. Very, very little less people migrate out of South India. And even that migration predominantly is to other countries, especially to the West. And what is the, as a lot of people ask, right, what is the problem in learning a third language? How are you going, what are you going to lose? What am I going to gain by learning a language that I'm not going to use? I live in Tamil Nadu. I'm good with Tamil. With people who don't know Tamil, who come and live here, they also study English. They know basic English at least. So I can converse with them in English. What is the usage? And just reading a few books is not going to make me speak or use Hindi well. Languages develop, the language skill develops by usage, right? So if I travel to Uttar Pradesh or Bihar, I live there for a few years, I'm naturally going to learn that language. Why should I learn that language when I'm in Tamil Nadu? Let the need occur, I will learn. So, and I will just give you one example, right? How many of us, including South Indians, are very fluent in English because our medium of education itself is mostly in English. How many of us are very fluent in English when we move out of college, when we graduate out of college? Majority is not. But what happens later, when they get into a job, there, the medium of communication is English, automatically within a year or two, they develop good English skills. Where does that come from? That's all from usage. So when there is no usage, there is no use in learning Hindi. I personally learned Hindi from the Hindi Prachar Sabha when I was young. Do I really know Hindi now? Absolutely not. I can barely read. So that's because I did not have any necessity to use it. And then why do you force it on us then? And in education, Hindi was slowly imposed on us in a different way, right? They already touched upon the topic. Private schools, flourishing here. Government schools kept the medium of education as Tamil for a long, long time. Very recently, they changed it. And right now, government schools are also offering medium of education as English. So that we oppose. The two-language system has literally thrown out Tamil in a lot of places. We don't have Tamil in a lot of places. The way we speak in our language, daily spoken language, Tamil has degraded a lot. We'll have to revive that. Similarly, we don't have Tamil anywhere. In our names, no. In our worship places like temples, no. We can't use Tamil. Sanskrit is the medium of prayer there. And as Justice already mentioned, right? In the courts, no. Then where is our language? Already even Tamil does not exist in a big way. At least we speak it now. If you keep on imposing this, that will also reduce. And slowly that's how languages die. And this is not something new here. It has happened in Africa. There are case studies for that as well. And in education, slowly they promoted CBSE education here. And right now it has been created here in the public mentality. CBSE is a higher level of education than the state board. And what is that doing to the public? People, even lower economic levels, they want their children to go to private schools, especially CBSE schools. There, Hindi is being imposed as third language. Slowly, Hindi is coming in, even without forcing in the government schools. Slowly, Hindi has come in, and in a lot of places, just to reduce the stress of studying the mother tongue. Because if you take, for example, you are appearing in your 10th or 12th exam, if you study your mother tongue, you will have to write essays and stories and all that for your exams. But if you choose Sanskrit or Hindi, example is Sanskrit or French, German, all these languages are offered here. So when you choose them as the second language, if you just write the opposites and meaning and then the spelling, these kind of things in 12th standard, you get 100 marks. So just for the marks and reducing the time spent to read that language, people are already choosing other languages. So what is the infrastructure that has been created in this country to make the mother tongue of people flourish? Slowly, this will show down the line in another 50 years, even the South Indian languages will lose its existence. Not to the level even what it is practiced today. So if you look at it, I just wanted to give some statistics, right? What it does to people is Hindi speaking state, Uttar Pradesh, you take that for example, there are about 2020, this year public exam, 10th and 12th, about 7.95 lakh people, students have failed in the Hindi subject. If it happens in Uttar Pradesh, where Hindi is the mother tongue, if they implement it in Tamil Nadu, think what happened. So that is what we are against. So what will happen is, the problem is that in this 7.95 lakh people who failed in Hindi, if you take Gujarati has very high percentage of pass percentage. And in Hindi, it is 66% pass. What will happen to the rest, 34% or what who failed in? Predominantly, most of them will go out as dropouts from the schools, or they will lose 1 year of their education. Is it really required by implementing a third language? Even implemented in, it may not be that. Say, for example, say 5 lakh people or 5% of the people fail in it. About 9.7 lakh people appear in the public exams in 10th and 12th every year. Say 5% fails, it is about 48,500. What will happen to the 48,500 people? They lose at least 1 year of their education. They will have to reappear in the exams. Or some of them, because of their economic state, they may even drop out from the school. Do we really want this to happen by imposing a language, which is not necessary? So that is the basic question here. And liberalism, when you talk about liberalism, think of Tamil Nadu. Do you think there is much liberal state than Tamil Nadu in India? We have Oriental schools in Tamil Nadu. I will give you the numbers as well. There are about 230 Urdu medium schools. There are 391 Telugu medium schools in Tamil Nadu. We have a separate stream of education, Oriental education, for the mother tongue to be preserved. Believe me, Gujarati, Rajasthani, and Sanskrit medium schools are there in Tamil Nadu. And that is what we have to do. We have to create infrastructure such that mother tongue. UNESCO, 2007, it passed a lot of bills a lot of researchers say that people who learn their mother tongue, their medium of education is in their mother tongue till the age of 12 are very good. Educational success is much better compared to people who have their medium of education in other languages. And there are case studies for this from South Africa and Namibia. Probably go to the UNESCO site. And as they already mentioned, right, talking about the infrastructure in the same, Minority Affairs Ministry's report, 2016 report is what I was referring to. Tamil Nadu state government has created textbooks in Hindi, in Urdu, in Telugu medium for them to learn, science and everything, maths and everything in their language. And I also looked up the statistics from Uttar Pradesh on that. Absolutely no info on any schools that gives other medium language education there. Similarly, 3 language formula, what have they done? First is Hindi, second is English, third either Urdu or Sanskrit. That's the only option they have in Uttar Pradesh. They did not create infrastructure for other languages to be taught in Uttar Pradesh. And there is absolutely no statistics on teachers, other language teachers, nor other language textbooks for schools. So I will give you one more statistic, right? they say any Indian language as third language in the new education policy. Fine. What will happen end of the day? Will Assamese guy living in Tamil Nadu, if he wants to learn Assamese, would there be an infrastructure to bring an Assamese teacher in every school here? Definitely not. That is not possible. There are about 30 different languages. So you will have to create an infrastructure outside of the schools, like the Hindi Prachar Sabha, where people can go and learn their own languages. There are a lot of online platforms as well, like Udemy and other stuff. You can probably create those kind of platforms. And I think this statistic was already mentioned. The government has spent 643.84 crores on Sanskrit, whereas just 22.94 crores have been spent on Tamil. And then we talk about equality for all the languages. Really, does equality exist? Definitely not. If you look at it really, if the government wants to improve the quality of education here, definitely they will have to invest in education. There is a precedent here. In 2016, I'm referring to an India Today article, Gujarat was lacking 13,000 teachers. The shortage is 13,000 teachers for different subjects in Gujarati public schools, government schools. So the government should be focusing to address that, because that will directly have an impact on the quality of education of that particular state, rather than creating an infrastructure, investing a lot of money in creating new Sanskrit and Hindi teachers and sending them across the country. Rather fix the issue in hand to improve the quality of education. And that's with that I end my first round.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Karthika Chelvan. Very good points, well-researched points. I'm sure there'll be discussion on these points later on. Much food for thought. I would like to invite the next speaker, which is Tirasuki Venkatesan, who's a scientist and a linguist. And I think he and Justice Katju know each other also. So, but I would request Tirasuki.
We have quarreled with each other also.
Yeah, that's why I said you know each other. You know somebody only when you quarrel with them.
Yeah.
So Tirasuki Venkatesan is our next speaker. We can keep to 10 minutes.
Yeah, just unmuted myself. So basically, I am on the side of Katju here. I'm not so much. See, although I'm a Tamil, very worried about Hindi hegemony and all that, but I'm more worried about the space of the hinterland, the so-called the hinterland. You know, even in the United States, they have the hinterland, which actually is very feudal and very backward, right? And it is a very big problem in the United States also. You know, the peripheries are very active in terms of, you know, if you take California and New York, they're like very active and, you know, industrially advanced, right? Whereas the inside and interior is generally very backward. This could be because of geography, because trade happens at the hinterland. You know, the interior is probably more agriculture, right? And the industrialization happens less there, right? So if you take, for example, the Gujarat model, right? Then the Gujarat model is different in the sense that it's happened in the hinterland, they have trade, and it's not actually in the hinterland. See, I'm now here treating the whole language discussion as a proxy for political discussion, in the sense that, see, there is this language discussion, but sometimes people are very angry and there is a very bitter discussion that happens because the language acts as a proxy for some other subterranean semantic discussion, you know, like the earlier person from Princeton was pointing out, you could actually use Google Translate and translate from one language to another. So in theory, there is no big difference between one language and the other, right? And but the language acts as a proxy for higher level semantics, right? And I do machine learning and artificial intelligence, so I know that you could actually automatically translate from one language to another, but language has higher aspects to it, cultural, historical, political aspects. So those are very important, right? So when we talk about Hindi, we're not talking about some Vedic times or some other time, right? And we're not even talking about the Hindustani here, because we're talking about the Hindi which happens right now in the hinterland. So if you take Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, Bihar, you see they have tremendous problems there. So there is so much of oppression, caste oppression, lower caste oppression that happens. So almost 5 million, 10 million Bihari lower caste workers migrate to Calcutta. And they're like rickshaw pullers and laborers. And another huge population migrates to Bombay because of the caste oppression and the zamindari system that they have inherited from the British system. And this happens in a massive scale, right? And because of this massive scale explosion, and because of the hinterland being agriculture, see, in those days, good old days, like Allahabad heydays, when agriculture was the main source of production, right? And industries haven't grown that well. There was no industrialization in the sense, right? Then the main trade happened in Allahabad, right? And those hinterland, and they were like during those Mughal periods, they were like the peak of trade activity in the world, right? And that's why the British wanted to come here, because the whole action was happening here. Just as they want they want to go to China now, right? Because the hectic activity is happening there. So the hinterland then becomes the language, the buzz, right? And everybody wants to have a share of it. Then, if you go to Delhi and you have all those poets, and it's a hive of activity, poetry and all that. But once the industrialization starts, then it starts developing in the peripheries. That it goes to Calcutta, it goes to Tamil Nadu or whatever, right? It goes to the peripheries, Gujarat. So the trade happens in the edges, right? And the industrialization happens there and grows massively there. Then the hyper activity happens there. And that's why the intellectual growth decayed completely in the hinterlands, right? And there was no, see, if you look at science also, there was this Jantar Mantar that happened during that time. The Jantar Mantar was the height of science in those days. But the Jantar Mantar, even if you see, there is a journal called Jantar Mantar, which is even now live and working, but that's run in Kerala. So you can see the action has now shifted to the south. So because the science, if you see the Nobel Prize in science, all that is happening in Tamil Nadu or Bangalore or whatever, right? Or some intellectual activity is happening in Bengal. And if you see the translations in science are happening not in Hindi, they're happening in Tamil Nadu, they're happening in Tamil, they're happening in Malayalam, they're happening in Bengali maybe, but nothing in the hinterland. So hinterland is a very backward land. And to impose Hindi on Tamil is a very backward act, because it means you are now stopping the progress of India. In fact, the reverse has to happen. The Tamil culture has to be imposed in the hinterland. In a sense, I'm not saying they should speak Tamil. That's a very stupid way of saying things. What I'm saying is that the caste fights, the kind of fights that Periyar is having, Periyar wants the lower caste to assert and come to equality, basically get rid of caste. And that's the kind of cultural activity that Periyar and, all the left movements in Kerala, the Bengali movements, all those movements brought. Some of those movements exist in UP also, like Rahul Sakrityan is there, he wrote a lot in Hindi, but I don't know how much it did penetration in the very backward states of hinterlands, right? And we have Kosambi also, but he's from Goa, but it's not got that penetration in Hindi, the culture. Whereas the Periyar movement really turned the whole politics of India upside down, right? Even Ambedkar and Periyar did that. So what they did was, it had a massive effect in Tamil Nadu, and the progress in Tamil Nadu was basically because of the churning of the caste that happened, and the get rid of caste system. And this not only stayed in Tamil Nadu, it went and penetrated to the interland. Uh, the Mandal Commission was actually initiated by one of Periyar's, Anamuthu. Anamuthu went and met Mandal, Professor Mandal, and they made sure that the Mandal Commission was implemented. And through that process, the backward caste for the first time, the Yadavs, Lali Yadavs and Mulayam Singh Yadavs shared power in UP, right? The churning happened. And now you can see the Baniyas could never become prime minister, right? No Guju Baniya could become. Now there's a Baniya from Gujarat. The first Baniya, father of the nation, couldn't become the prime minister, So he was murdered. Gandhi was murdered. So there was this churning happening already, which Tamil Nadu played a major role. So it is other way around, in fact, the Tamil culture that needs to penetrate to the hinterland and cause a major industrial change, and remove all the caste oppression and improve the quality of education and industrialization. Everything needs to be done in the hinterland, because otherwise we'll have lots of these laborers traveling all the way from walking thousands of kilometers during coronavirus from the hinterland into Bangalore and some of the industrialized areas, peripheries of India. That is my view. See, the language is a proxy for politics, so we shouldn't think of them as. See, I don't mind be suddenly turning my language into English if it is meaningful to my people. It's basically because I want to speak in Tamil, because that's the way I can talk to my people, without getting alienated. The way you would want to talk to Allahabad people, those Shehri, highly cultured people in Allahabad and Lucknow, you want to talk to them, you better talk in their language, right? So I think of the cultural transformation that is possible through these interactions, and the periphery interacting into the middle. That's also very much needed, So that's my viewpoint.
Thank you very much, Tirusuki, for a very important point made, that perhaps what India needs is Tamil imposition on the rest of India. I mean, I'm being provocative and simplistic, of course, that's not what he said, but he's arguing a very important point. Language is not just about utility in terms of being able to communicate. Yes, a Tamilian traveling to the north of India would find it useful to speak Hindi, no doubt about it. But language is much more than that. And apart from the cultural aspect of it, it is also a repository of memories, of struggles of people, changes in attitude, changes in social relations, changes in hierarchies. And this point has been brought earlier also by other speakers, that Hindi maybe, in your view, what you say is Hindustan, which is quite different from Hindi as in the official sense, which is that it is a proxy for a particular culture, a Sanskritized culture. Sanskrit in these Indian census has 23,000 speakers or something like that, but it's an official language of India. The question is why? And this is a valid question. There are many languages which are far greater. Bundi, for example, which is spoken in parts of Andhra Pradesh and Chhattisgarh, or Santhali. And many of these languages are completely not recognized at all. There is no encouragement, there's no resources. So we are talking about actually not your viewpoint here really. And that's what is important about this discussion. That, sir, you gave us an opportunity to start this discussion, but it's a far more important discussion which the rest of India should hear. Because as has been pointed out in Tamil Nadu in particular, Tamil Nadu was a forerunner for many things, many progressive things, which are today across the country, whether it is caste-based reservations or the midday meal scheme in schools. I think that what we are really calling for, what we are really hearing here is not an objection to learning Hindi. Your point about it being a useful language is well taken. I think a lot of people here already know Hindi as far as I can see, and they've learned it voluntarily. And that's what you recommend also, that they should learn it voluntarily. Actually, the real problem is of the larger what Suki said about language being a proxy for politics. And that is why it arouses so much of resentment and emotion here. With that, I would like you to intervene briefly before we take some questions from the audience. Justice Katju, anything you want to say at this stage before we get some questions from the audience?
Yeah, I entirely agree with Karthikeya Chalman, I think that's his name. He's absolutely right that we must give encouragement to all languages, many of which are sort of, if not dying out, they are in a weak position. We must give encouragement, funds to all languages. I agree with Karthikeya Chalman, he's absolutely right that if we want this country to hold together, it is absolutely essential to guarantee equality not only by words but by deeds, namely by providing funds to all these other languages about which he mentioned, so that all the languages, there's so many languages. The tribal people speak Gondwi and what was mentioned, Santhal, and the Todas in the Nilgiris, I believe they speak some other dialect. They all must be given encouragement, and they should not be allowed to die out. So I entirely agree with this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Justice Katju. As we know that your position is a very balanced position, and I think it's been an important debate. There are some people in the audience who would like to ask questions. I think one person who is with us is Irfan Ali from, I think he's based in the US. Mr. Irfan, if you want to ask a question or say something briefly.
Hello, Vanakkam, NINK, White Turku, Nanori. I may be wrong, but I tried at least. Thank you for having me here. So I think the very first thing, I feel that the name of this, and I won't call it as a debate, it's more like a discussion which is required. I have slight problem with the title of this discussion, Anti-Hindi War or Political Gimmick. It's not about anti-Hindi, it's other way around. If we go by the content of this discussion. And Your Grace, you remember when I was having conversation with you a couple of days ago, I clearly mentioned that I will be on a different page than you because I have different ideas. And if you go by the today's discussion, it's a beautiful discussion, and perhaps it can only be happen. And I'm being a little nasty here. Only be happen with the Tamilian people. So civil, a beautiful discussion, and all the points that Mr. Natraj, Mr. Satya, Mr. Anadurai, or Mr. Tiago, or Mr. Mohan, or Mr. Karthi, or Mr. Suki has made, they're beautiful. But mainly because this whole conversation was ignited by Mr. Katju, I will make some comment on his comments. So, and I know about the language because I work for a language learning program here in the United States. So I think Mr. Katju made a point of, Tamilian having problems when they go to other part of India. For what? Because the taxi wala will speak Hindi. Well, the language, the technology fills that gap. So you do not need to learn Hindi. On the flip side, most of the migration, and I think somebody made this comment, most of the migration happens other way around. People from North India come to the Southern India, most of the engineers, because there are more opportunities. So it should be other way around. People should learn Tamil or Telugu or all other languages rather than, those northern rather than Hindi. And I myself, I come from Meerut, UP. I'm Hindi speaking. That's my native language. Um, so this is very interesting. There are several points when so when we talk about the political gimmick, it appears that it's more like political, because if I go by the comment that Mr. Katju made, he made a comment like, you know, all the politicians, they will ask their kids to learn Hindi. Well, clearly, because they are politicians and that's their agenda. It's all about politics. I slightly have different idea about when you call Hindustani and you limit Hindustani just to language Hindi. Hindustani is not all about Hindi. Hindustani is the composite culture of various languages. Hindustan is, you know, a country, a beautiful country across the Indus River. I myself call Hindustani not because I speak Hindi, but because I belong to a country, a beautiful, diversified country that has several different languages and different culture. When it comes to the culture, because Mr. Katju made that comment, and I'm sorry, Mr. Katju, because I'm talking about all your points here. I was making notes, and I think I have slightly different view than yours, and I respect your views. You're not forcing anybody to learn Hindi, but the idea of force starts from the point when you float some idea. You cannot force any ideology just by saying it first time. First you float it, you ask people, maybe you should, and then it becomes must. When it comes to the Western, I mean the UP itself, because I know the UP, I grew up in a small village, and I know how people think there. I grew up with them, and I'm sorry to say that even this is the problem. This is the racism and discrimination in India. I'm from Western UP, and we even make fun of the Eastern UP people. Why? Because they have different dialect? Sure. So now when it comes to the Tamil, and somebody made a point that the Bollywood is helping people to bring together and helping people to learn the Hindi language. Actually, it is, but Bollywood is also damaging other culture. For example, if in a Bollywood movie you have a Tamil character, it limits that character to lungi or idli dosa. Anything beyond Rajasthan or beyond central part of the India is southern India. It's all about dosa. If, for example, Punjabi is a part of the North India, but if there is a Punjabi character in Bollywood movie, it must be a comedian. So is this the composite culture? So the Bollywood is actually not penetrating, the language, but it's kind of, it's a business. So I won't get into the Bollywood in more details. But one more point that Mr. Katju made, that in Pakistan, in Kashmir, in Nagaland, they speak Hindi. Well, they do not speak Hindi, but because they need to communicate, they need some link language. So they kind of learn, and it happens everywhere. By saying that in Pakistan and Kashmir and Nagaland and in other states, they speak Hindi, you are actually dismantling the ideas of the local language. So Pakistan, it speaks Urdu. Kashmir speaks Kashmiri language, and I don't know what you call. And Nagaland, they speak probably Bodo. So where are these languages? They have the beautiful culture, and Urdu is a beautiful example. You have beautiful culture, and the entire Bollywood and the poetry and everything is in Urdu. But right now, can you ask people to learn Urdu? You won't, because the moment you will ask people to learn Urdu, and you yourself is a great Urdu speaker. I know that because I talk to you and I know your knowledge about Urdu. The point that I was making, the moment you ask people to learn Urdu, people will start connecting this Urdu to a particular religion. And this is the mentality of the India. Your Grace, you yourself have said that 80% of Indians are stupid. Well, most
90%.
of them,
I said 90%.
Correct. So 90,
Not
I'm sorry. I mean, I was not having the right statistics here, but 90%. I believe most of those people are from North India. And reason, because I know I lived with them. And it's, so this is something, and when you say you should learn, speak, for example, I travel across the globe. I've been to Japan, been to Europe and the France and everywhere. I don't speak Japanese. I never have had any issue communicating with the Japanese people. I have seen people here in the United States, the couple who speak totally different language, but there is a technology to fill that gap, the language barrier. So what you are doing, because the Tamilians are so smart, they're intelligent, their education system is way much better than North India. So you are giving them one more task. Hey, you know what? Because you are intelligent people, so you can learn another language. Well, I can take it as a compliment for Tamilian people or Southern Indian people. They can certainly learn, but it's not really, really required. I mean, we should applaud all their effort. Somebody made a beautiful comment about the economy, that their contribution, the southern part of the India and their contribution of Indian GDP or Indian economy is huge. The burden, and I would call it as a burden, because if you talk about economy and then the taxation, the UP, Bihar, and Bengal, and you know better than me about this economy, how there's a huge gap. So it should be like, I will go to my previous comment, the earlier comment. It should be other way around. People should learn Tamil or Southern language to understand the culture. For example, in Muslims, there is so if you need to read Quran, you need to learn Arabic. So if you need to learn some culture, you need to learn their language, the French culture. People to get to know about the French culture, they learn French, not because they need to. My daughter, who is 11 years old, she speaks 5 different languages. English is her first primary language, and then she learned Spanish because she got some Spanish is the second language here, and now she's learning French. She learned Hindi, not from me or from her mom, but from my mom when she would visit her here. So she had to speak in Hindi. But here's the problem. When she went to India first time, I remember 5 or 6 years ago, and she started speaking Hindi, people would make fun of her because of her accent. And she would stop speaking Hindi. Now I can understand a Tamilian or other native speaker who doesn't speak Hindi and starts speaking Hindi in Hindi belt. What kind of mindset people would may have. Mr. Karthi made everybody made some amazing comments, and Mr. Karthi made some Oriental education system in Tamil Nadu, which I think I was not aware of that. And I totally understand if that culture is there in Tamil Nadu, it has to be there across the pan India, not just in Tamil Nadu. One example, when Prime Minister Modi came to United States last time in this game show, Howdy Trump event, and he was addressing all the Indians people, and he was telling that everything is well in India. You know what he did? He just didn't say it in Hindi. He said in different languages, Sab Changasi, everything is all well. Or and this is not a right example, but what I'm talking about, when you target the audience, and when you need to pass your information, you learn that language. It's not that Mr. Modi speaks all the language, but he made up those sentences to address those people. I think Mr. Suki made about the hinterland is the hub of language, and based upon the the requirement you just learn, and he gave some examples of United States. We cannot compare India with the United States because we have a uniform, the English common language across all the states. Doesn't matter if you live in the United States, in New York or California or Midwest, you still speak English. In India, that's a little different. The CBSC, now they are opening all these schools in India, the CBSC school. It's even though it's the name of the CBSC is, I think, Central Board of Secondary Education. But the forcing that Hindi is, I think they need to customize that program, that education program based upon the state. They can keep the same name, but language is not just a local language is not just about, it's a language. It is the, I mean, you develop emotional intelligence by learning local language, and you cannot take it. I mean, I'm a Hindi speaking person, doesn't matter where I live in this world, in United States or France or Europe, I will still feel the feelings that I will have. I will be more connected to my own language. And when you talk about Hindustani, Justice Katju, and you said, oh, it's not about, I'm not talking about Hindi, I'm talking about Hindustani, the dialect, the people who learn, like in UP, in Hindi, tum kaise ho? In Western UP, oye, kaisa hai tu? So, or, you know, so this is very small sentence, but that language, the Hindustani that you call, you can, no school teaches that language. You learn when you go to a particular region, you automatically learn. I don't think we need this subject or this topic or, you know, this debate or this, I mean, discussion is great, but this debate in itself is, I don't think it's required. When we talk about multi-planetary system at this moment and the globalization, what we are talking about, we are like, oh, learn Hindi, because you know what? You need to go to Delhi from Chennai and you may need to speak to a taxi driver or a chole bhature wala to bhaiya, give me the chole bhature. I think this is a very, very, you know, this is not required at all. We should perhaps learn, if we want to learn a language, if you learn a culture, we should learn that local language, and it should be other way around as well. Somebody asked, Mr. Satya asked a question, how many states in North India actually teaches some other languages? And this is a very valid point. Actually, none. In Haryana, I think there was an exception. In UP, none. There was an Urdu language, but I think they are taking it out from the syllabus. I remember when I was a kid in Doordarshan, there were regional languages program or the movies. It has, I think it's no more. They don't show it. There is no news in regional languages. So I think it's more like forcing of you know, the one language Hindi, and it's not just about Hindi language, but their idea of having this Hinduism, Hindustani, Hindutva is much more than that. So when it comes to the language, of course, Hindi is a beautiful language, but hey, what are the literatures that we have in Hindi? Only some, like Munshi Premchand, Jaishankar Prasad, and some poet. Harivansh Rai Bachchan maybe. But on the flip side, if you go to Tamil, the Sangam culture, it's very, very rich. If you need to learn the Indian culture, and Tamil is one of them, the great, you got to learn Tamil and learn that culture and pass it to the next generation and make this world or India as a beautiful place for next generation and retain the culture, you know, the beautiful diversified culture that we have. And I think that's it. In terms of the data, I think Hindi, 692 million people speak Hindi, and then the second language is English. 129 million people speak English in India, and that is as per the 2011 census. And then there are some other language, Bengali, Marathi, and Telugu. Let it be. I mean, I think like just because I said, I have totally different view than yours, even though I'm Hindi speaking person and I still speak Hindi to my daughter, and I try to, and she learned. But I think imposing or, you know, just suggesting you should learn, the way you call you should, the idea of, you know,
I can't even suggest. I can't even suggest according to you. Are you being democratic?
No,
It's
I'm
a
being
suggestion.
democratic. So
What
you
is
are
this?
a rational.
I mean, I can't even suggest. My mouth should be shut. is this democracy? A person can't even suggest. I have
No,
said if you find my suggestion reasonable, then accept it. If you find it unreasonable, reject it. You have a problem even with that. Listen, no,
sir.
you are being undemocratic. I'm sorry, you are being undemocratic. You don't
Sir,
want people even to suggest. I should keep my mouth shut and not speak
No,
like a deaf
no.
and dumb person. I should keep my mouth shut. Wonderful.
No, sir.
Then
So what I'm saying that
I
when a person
repeatedly
like
said I'm against the imposition of Hindi,
correct.
but surely I have a democratic right to suggest. But
No.
you want to shut my mouth
No, I
to
think
saying that. Wonderful.
Sir,
I
so
think
just
that,
one point. So just
Okay.
one point I'll make. Justice Katju, I'm sorry if you felt that I'm kind of dismantling your idea. No, here's the problem. When somebody like you, who got the great credibility and the great followership, you say something that becomes a subject of discussion. That topic becomes a subject of discussion. So you yourself, people are not rational like you yourself. Your idea is beautiful, and we understand and appreciate that. But the way people take it, and here's the example: you go to your Facebook timeline and read those comments and see how people are interpreting your idea. So that's the fear, and that's the problem.
Debate is healthy. Debate is healthy. I've initiated a debate. I'm not saying you must accept my views. Surely I can initiate a debate. What's wrong in that? I just can't understand what's the logic. A person should not even debate.
I think that no, I think we are having this debate. We are having this debate right now, and thanks to you. And I think Mr. Irfan made some important points, but he didn't mean to tell you not to speak. I think that would be. But I have a different point to make.
Irfan is a very good friend of mine, by the way.
No, I know. No, but I have a different point to make quickly.
A younger brother.
Yeah. Now about the point about 90% of Indians being idiots, I have a little bit of difference. I think you have to look at it like this, that 10% of the Indian population is making fools out of the rest of Indians. I think that would be a more accurate statement. And that has to be opposed. And whether it is people in the north or the south, I think many of us in all over the country, for that matter, are in the same boat. There's 10% of the Indian population. If you take the wealth distribution in India, that is very clear. Who holds all the money? And so the politics of culture, language, everything follows of religion, because the needs of this 10% have to be protected. But having said that, I would like to invite another of our members of the audience, Mr. Yogesh Balakrishnan, to speak next. If you can keep it brief, I think we're running out of time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I understand. So to begin with, actually, my perception about Katju has changed because of this meeting. This is my understanding of this is my understanding before I get into this meeting. I think Mr. Katju was recommending to learn Hindi, and then I think he made that statement at the wrong point in time. Because there's already some imposition which was going on due to this, through this new education policy. But after saying, to add on to what Irfan said, I noticed a certain kind of, chauvinism when people from North come to South. Let's say, I'm a Tamilian, but I lived in Bangalore, still home is Bangalore. So when North Indians come to Bangalore, what they say is, they get angry on us and then say, you guys are not speaking in Hindi, instead of even making an attempt to learn Kannada. I somehow think in one way or the other, okay, people like Mr. Katju says that Tamil Indians should learn Hindi, South Indians should learn Hindi. I think North Indians derives this sort of some belief that, okay, Hindi is superior and everybody in India should learn Hindi. I think those kind of suggestions is powering their belief as to, okay, Hindi is the national language of India and everyone should should speak in Hindi. It doesn't matter where I go. That is something which is bothering us. And in the way of recommending, even that recommendation, we should be a little bit careful about as to how other people infer it. While, okay, it might be a plain suggestion, but I think it is powering the Hindi belt as to their superstitious belief that okay, this is Hindi and this is India and everybody in India should speak Hindi. That's something which I wanted to highlight. And also coming to this regional language, I strongly oppose calling any language as regional language. For that matter, Hindi is also a regional language. That's it from my end.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. Well put. I think what is a language was well defined by someone who said a language is a dialect with a big army behind it. And I think that's why these whole terminology of what is a language and what is a dialect. In the north of India, also I am a Tamilian who was brought up in the north of India. So I'm familiar with the north quite a bit. And as Justice Katju mentioned earlier, people are very liberal, very warm, very hospitable. In fact, they're, I would say, in some ways, even warmer than people from the south are as people, you know. But I think they're also very oppressed lot. I think there's a lot of oppression in the north, which Suki mentioned about the caste system, the feudalism, and you have a small set of people in the north who dominate the north itself, who impose their version of Hindi on the non-Hindi speaking people of the North India. The Hindi belt, these numbers that are given out as so many people speaking Hindi is a bit misleading in that sense. These people have never been given a choice really. Anyway, that's a separate point, and the democratization of India, and not just India, but as Justice Katju would say, all of South Asia, you know, is a long sort of standing task, and which more struggles are required, in which the assertion of cultural identity and national, subnational identities will play a very important role in the democratization of India. Unless the language groups of India assert themselves and fight for their identity, there cannot be democracy, because democracy is possible only when there is parity between different groups. Right now in India, there is no parity. That is why there is so much of resentment. The next speaker I would like to ask to intervene is Ms. Sanjana from Australia.
Mr.
She's
Satya,
left,
before
I'm sorry.
Sanjana starts,
So,
can
Mr. Irfan,
I?
you want to say something quickly? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, briefly.
So before Sanjana starts, I want to make. You said you said the people of North India are very liberal and look, I don't want to demean anybody because I grew up, I lived all my life in Delhi and UP, and so I have slightly different opinion. And the example the Mr. Katju gave, this the Kanimoi example at the airport. So that is one great example that tells you all this story. So instead of suggesting Kanimoi to learn Hindi, how about that if we teach little etiquettes to the people of North India, or all the for the fact like all the country, to like the India is not all about Hindi, but it's about the composite culture with different languages. So I wanted to, because this whole incident ignite this discussion, and I think there was somebody stupid who had no clue what India is all about. India is not about just Hindi. So I just wanted to make that comment.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the intervention. Justice Katju, any comments from you at this stage? I think we are nearing the end of our discussion. I'll ask other speakers also to make, if there are any additional points to say. But Justice Katju, if you want to say something.
Mr. Satya, Justice Katju is not there in the meeting right now.
Okay. If I think some of the other speakers have. Thiru Annadurai, please go ahead. To unmute you, 1 second.
See, the repeated criticism that has been put forth by everybody, all is that the politicians' sons are studying Hindi, they are running schools, and they are studying Hindi, and they are depriving everybody else of studying Hindi. That has become a rhetoric. See, first and foremost, there is no use in making anybody study Hindi because it's not going to give any incentive to anybody to study Hindi. Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So there is no incentive. See, if a politician's son or their children, they want them to do well in terms of education, all of them are sent abroad. They ensure that they are very good in English. That is what is happening here in Tamil Nadu, and of course across the country. We are seeing all the union ministers' children. None of them are here. All of them are in Oxford, Harvard, Cambridge, everywhere. So it is a fallacy that everybody else other than the politician children are studying Hindi. See, when they are studying in a CBSE school, they will have a choice as a third language. They have to study Hindi. I think at least up to 5th standard or 8th standard. Apart from that, nobody is making anybody study Hindi because there is no incentive. Nobody is going and searching for a job in New Delhi right now. India, Tamil Nadu especially, is a den of engineers and doctors. No engineering jobs are available in North India. No medical jobs are available in North India. They are available in USA. They are available in England. So people from Tamil Nadu are migrating there. That is because of their proficiency in English. If I look at one article that was very eye-opening, I think it was written by one Swaminathan Anklesarya, who writes about Swanomics. Of that, if India is an economic might, economic superpower, that is because of Annadurai, Mr. Annadurai, Perarijar Anna. He said, of course, he said unwittingly, the Hindi agitation ensured that English stayed in India. And much of India's economic might is attributable to the knowledge in English. Imagine if there was no Hindi agitations and English was wiped out, only Hindi was there. Is Hindi enough to fight globally? See, India's biggest economic strength is the information technology sector. Without English, imagine the kind of money we are spinning in those sectors and the kind of money remittances. Half of Silicon Valley, they say, is from India. New York, you can see a lot of Indians everywhere. If we were not proficient in English, I don't think the Indians would have had that kind of an opportunity. So it is a fallacy that anybody would ask their children to study Hindi. Definitely that was not out of choice. It is out of compulsion of the standard or the school they are studying. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I see some hands in the audience. I think we have another 15 minutes or so. Can I ask Thiru, somebody from the Riyadh Mandalam Sentamil Peravai? Riyadh Mandalam Sentamil Peravai.
Sure. So, good evening. Myself Gopalakrishnan from KS area, Sentamil Peravai. Is this audible?
Yeah, it's audible.
Yeah. So the query is, I'm going to ask a question over the people, especially Katju sir is available, Mr. Saravanan Advocate is available, my good friend Katju is available. My query is, ultimately I am from Tamil Nadu. I have decided it has to be continue only for the 2 languages. So the thing is, once the NEP is going to be implemented throughout the India, whether I can get the permanent solution to continue my 2 languages system in Tamil Nadu. The thing is, in Kashmir, in Northeast, the constitution itself, they have given separate rights or power to them to carry their own way. But the thing is, the government has decided they abolish everything. If the government has decided to abolish the Kashmir Act, they will quietly remove the constitution. My query is, I'm a Tamilian. I just want to continue my 2 languages system ever. Once though the NEP has been implemented by the government, is there any specific possibility in the constitution itself to continue the 2 languages system in Tamil Nadu? This is my query. Those who are aware about this, I'll get the information from them.
Okay. I'll ask Torer Tyagu to respond to this question, if possible. Quickly. I think he's...
The imposition of Hindi springs from the constitution itself. You are not touching the issue at all. You just leave it out and discuss about what Northerners think, what Kannadigas think, what the man on the street thinks, what the schools thinks, etc. The main issue is, being a democracy, being the government of the rule of law, the basic law is the constitution. The constitution is discriminatory against non-Hindi people. That's a basic issue. As far as the constitution imposes Hindi, you cannot prevent it from coming into education, etc. You make Tamil one of the official languages, you will see so many people learning Tamil urgently. Even in 30 days, they will learn Tamil. Because Tamil will be the official language, they will need Tamil to join government jobs, etc., to write examinations, etc. So, don't accept this constitution as final. That's a problem. This is a discriminatory constitution. Anna didn't accept this constitution. He fought against it. Now, just you agreed to abide by this constitution, you bow your head to the constitution. How can we fight Hindi without fighting the constitution? That's a problem. This cannot be solved for each and every individual like the questionnaire. It has to be solved on a social level, on a legal level. The sorry state of affairs is, even intellectuals, just to speak about the advisability of learning this language, that language, etc. That's not the issue at all. The issue is, the constitution imposes Hindi. That's a basic issue. The imposition of Hindi springs from the constitution. The same way, English is a foreign language. However, it may be useful for us. However, we may be conversing in the same language. But that is an imposition coming from the colonial days. We are still dependent on English for so many things. That is a sad state of affairs. In Tamil Nadu, I don't know whether Justice Katju knows this. We have Tamil medium in law education. At the Ambedkar Law College, we have Tamil medium. Only because of this Tamil medium in law education, so many young people from the oppressed communities have come up, and they are vying with the forward community people at the courts, at least at the lower courts. But in the High Court and Supreme Court, English is a language. Even Hindi is not even the language of the High Courts and Supreme Courts. I say this is the one language formula followed by the Indian state. I don't just question the government of India, not just Modi, the state as exemplified by the constitution. So this is a question of fighting the constitution, fighting national oppression, not a question of learning this language or that language, etc. That's my reply to that friend.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tiago, for a very clear answer. I see Mr. Vinod in the audience to quickly ask a question or make a point.
Hi all, thanks for giving me this opportunity. I'm myself from NTK, Nam-Tamil Party. I do agree with why Tamil Nadu is talking about the equality. But my point is, leaving about the Hindi imposition, a lot of people are now unwantedly talking about the English imposition and says it is development. And that too I hear from Saravanan sir is shocking, because we know India is developed in information technology is not because of English. Then New Zealand and Australia will develop that skill and they can go up in GDP because of information technology. It is because of India's policy in importing computer education in school levels, and that too Kalanger imported the Tamil computer studies in the school curriculum, and the skill of in computer language that aided, and also the pay manpower. This is because what they're developing in the information technology, not just because of English. And to everyone here, there is no regional, there is no national language. All the Indian languages are national languages. We should use the technology to make all the languages to be in the day-to-day use of in all the areas of the India. We are not even talking about the Tulu. We are not even talking about the Toda. We are not talking about the Maithili. These languages don't even have the script. Where the money is going on, it is only going on in Hindi and Sanskrit. Okay, talk about Sanskrit. It is the ancient language. Why only 600 crores only for the Sanskrit? Why not for Pali? Why not for Arthamagadi? These are another older languages spoken by Buddha, Ashoka. Okay, Tamil Nadu is there for taking care of Tamil. But what about these languages? Why no one talk about in these aspects? That's my question here. So anyone from the panel can answer it. Sorry.
Mr. Saravanan, because your name was referred to. Yeah, unmuted.
Yeah. See, that's what the learned friend was referring to, that the computer education policy was implemented, and that is the reason why there is the information technology boom. I would like to remind the friend that computer is in English. We don't have software development in other languages, at least probably now we have not. When I'm talking about when all this tidal parks, all this this boom, this IT boom came up. So English definitely has contributed to our economic growth. It is an undisputable fact. Of course, we should make, see, if you are thinking about 50 years ahead, the only way forward to ensure that Tamil stays competitive is to have scientific literature in Tamil. And of course, in all the other regional languages which want to stay relevant.
Yeah, even though you were, a lot of people have made this point that English is the language of computer, but here is one narrative that is there in in North India. The Sanskrit is the best suitable language for computer. I'm yet to see some examples where you can actually use Sanskrit or write the programs, but hey, this is the well-known, idea that they're imposing to the people.
Thank you. Thank you. Another speaker from the audience I would like to invite is Bindu Ravishankar.
Hello, sir. Salutations to all the dignitaries present here today. I would like to draw upon comparisons between India and Europe. So having been a Kannadiga living in Bangalore and also living in Germany, I felt that India, having so many languages, is just one country, whereas Europe has so many countries which speaks so many different languages. So, like we had an incident when a person was asked when she landed in the airport, if you don't speak Hindi, are you even an Indian? So imagine someone telling that to some person who enters Germany, and a person asks, if you don't speak English, are you a European? So I think that is the kind of comparisons that I can draw. What happens in Germany is everyone is given an opportunity to take up an integration course so that they can get integrated into the culture and language. So anyone who enters is given an opportunity to learn the language and culture. So I was thinking, why not we adopt it? So we have a lot of people coming from the North India into the South India for employment opportunities. So why don't they also have something called the integration course so that they can learn the language, be it wherever they come into, be it Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, or wherever, so that they can at least have the minimum possibility of having a conversation, or at least able to read a little of the language and know the culture. So also about having the Hindi as the link language is another thing that is being popularized now. So why we are seeing Hindi to be the link language is because English is a colonial language. So it is not a language of India. So we need a language from India to represent India. So suppose if I go in a flight, a German flight, they will have announcement in German as well as English. So now in India, they're having the same announcement, one in Hindi and one in English. So when India needs a representative language, I think Hindi can be that representative language, because most of us can at least speak or can at least understand a little. So that is why I feel Hindi can be a link language. And another thing that is coming up is the national education policy, where we have the 3-language policy, which is already there in Karnataka. So we had English, Hindi, and Kannada that we learned. So I, having learned Hindi, it became very easy for me to converse with my Hindi speaking friends. I was able to integrate with them. And also the laborers who come from North India. I could also speak easily with them, or the neighbors who are not very fluent in English or any other language which I knew. So I feel that way Hindi can be a link language. And there's another question of, if we have the 3-language policy here, in North India, I think there will also be the same 3-language policy, where they will, suppose in West Bengal, they will take Bengal, English, and Hindi. So, but there will not be an opportunity of really integrating the languages everywhere. So I think if a person wants to come into another state, I think there should be an opportunity of this integration course happening for them. So I would like to end this point, and I would like to thank you all for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you very much. Next, I would like to ask Mr. Aditya.
Hello, can everybody hear me?
Slightly louder, please. Yeah.
Can everyone hear me now?
No, your voice is very low. Can you increase your volume?
Can everyone? Hello.
Much better.
Yeah, I was going to say thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak, sir. And I don't think anyone in this meeting has made the case for Tamil well enough. Actually, this meeting is dominated by Tamils. The better part of this meeting was conversed by people whose native language is Tamil, but we stuck to English. If this meeting were dominated by Hindi-speaking people, they would have, at some point in time, switched to Hindi. So this is where the imposition of Hindi starts. It starts from the instinct of Hindi-speaking people. I really respect Irfan Ali for his wonderful comments, and he is one of the most sensible speakers in the floor today. But when Ms. Bindu says that everyone in India should start to speak Hindi just because at some point of time in her life, it was useful for her to have learned Hindi, I think it's rather ridiculous. Because firstly, not everyone in the planet, not everyone in India would have the same circumstances as her, because I might end up living in Karnataka for the rest of my life. I'm a native Tamil, and I might not even need Hindi, okay? So just because you had to face circumstances in which it was required of you to learn Hindi, doesn't mean everyone in India has to stick to Hindi. And as for the point made by Justice Katju regarding everyone learning Hindi voluntarily, he asked whether he doesn't have the democratic right to suggest that everyone learn Hindi. I think that argument is a bit flawed, because it's very patronizing. While you are telling people to ask to learn Hindi voluntarily, you're patronizing non-Hindi speaking people. Okay, it's still hegemony. You're just imposing it on us in a subtle, softer way, but it's still imposition. All right. So I don't think anyone should learn any language forcibly. And if anyone wants to learn any language voluntarily, he would do so himself. For instance, if I want to learn Japanese, I would learn Japanese myself. I don't want anyone telling me that you should voluntarily learn some language, okay? Because it's still imposition.
How is it imposition? Can I not even suggest?
You can definitely suggest, sir, but you're patronizing me when you say I should voluntarily learn Hindi.
No,
because
I fought against Hindi imposition when I was in Annamalai University. In deeds, I fought it. You people only talk about in words. Can't a person even make a... Are you democratic people that nobody
I'm
should
sorry,
even...
sir. You can definitely suggest, but if I had made the same suggestion somewhere in Allahabad, people would have been up in arms. Okay, I live in
That
Delhi.
would be wrong. Yes, if people
I
were
can't
going
imagine to
up in arms,
suggest.
I will oppose that. You can make any suggestion. Anybody can make any suggestion. What's wrong in a suggestion? I just fail
So
to
all you're
understand.
saying is you can shout your mouth off and get away with it, is it?
Listen, I'm not shouting.
Because you have
I'm
a
just
democratic
giving...
right. Because you have a democratic right, you
Listen, how am
exercise
I
it and you
shouting?
shoot your mouth off and you just get away with it because you have the
What's wrong with
democratic
you?
right to exercise your freedom.
If I make a suggestion, I'm shouting. What's wrong with you? I'm just making a suggestion. If you find my suggestion reasonable, then accept it. If you find it unreasonable, reject it. What's the problem? I just fail to understand what is the logic?
I don't think you really understand the difference between patronizing someone and
How am I
someone.
patronizing? How am I patronizing? I'm just giving a suggestion. I identify myself with Tamilian. I'm as much as a Tamil, although born Kashmiri, but I regard myself as Tamilian. Nanum Uru Tamidar.
This is what every Hindi speaker.
What's wrong with you? I mean, a person can't even make a suggestion. Is this democratic? A person can't even suggest.
We have come back to this point again. This point was raised earlier also. And in the interest of time, I think we have spent around almost 3 hours. I would like to request you to give your closing remarks on the overall discussions that took place here, which I think everybody will agree was very fruitful and very polite and actually a constructive debate. I think everybody has learned something here, and thanks to you for initiating this, giving us the opportunity. As I've said before, you are quite unusual because anybody else, from many people we know from the north of India, would not have taken the position that you've taken. And it's because of past experiences that people are suspicious or hostile. I think their attitude is rooted in a certain experience of how India has been run for a very long time. So you're different. That's why we are here talking to you and learning from you also. And I hope some of the points made by other speakers here are something that you would also consider, and I know you will consider. I invite you to give your closing remarks before we wind up this wonderful debate.
Let me tell you, I had to fight against the Hindi fanatics when I was in Allahabad. I fought against the Hindi fanatics and I told them that if you don't learn English, your children will only be fit to drive bullock carts, nothing else. I fought against the Hindi fanatics repeatedly, and I used to go to their meetings where I was surrounded by these Hindi fanatics, and I said, you people are talking nonsense that abolish English and all. You cannot do without English. It is absolutely essential if you want to come into the modern world. Please try to consider what I'm saying. This is my suggestion. Again, it's up to you to accept or reject. I have suggested learn English because it is the language of science. And this is the modern world, is the world of science. And you can't, all the books in science and engineering, medicine, etc., are all in English. But I've suggested, and again, this is just a suggestion, that you, in your own interest, you learn Hindi. It will be beneficial to you. But if you don't find the suggestion reasonable, don't accept it. What's your problem? I just fail to understand. When I put up a Facebook post, first thing I begin with is that I'm strongly opposed to imposition of Hindi. And then I said that although I'm strongly opposed to imposition of Hindi, I advise in your own interest learn Hindi. The moment I put up this Facebook post, such abuses are poured on me by Tamilians. I mean, some of them I had to delete filthy abuses. What is wrong with you people? Can't a person give a suggestion? You may consider it and see whether it is reasonable or not. Don't accept it if it is not reasonable. But I should keep my mouth. I'm deaf and dumb. I should not even speak. Wonderful. I'm going to speak. Whether you like it or dislike it, I'm going to give my suggestion. It's just a suggestion, and I have a democratic right to give suggestions. You may do whatever you like. I will not accept this kind of behavior. that a person should not even suggest. And the moment he suggests, he's imposing. Wonderful logic. A suggestion is an imposition. You are peculiar kind of people.
No.
What is this kind of behavior?
Sir, that's a minority opinion. I don't think anybody is saying you can't suggest.
No, I got a huge number of comments every time I say this on my Facebook page. There's a barrage of attacks on me, filthy abuses and whatnot hurled on me.
Facebook is the wrong forum also, sir.
What forum? Tell me, where should I go?
Yeah, this kind of face-to-face is much better than Facebook.
I suggested this, but Irfan Ali, my dear friend, who's my younger brother, he said, you are imposing Hindi by just giving suggestion. Strange logic. I mean, yes, Irfan, what do you have to say to in reply to what I'm saying?
No, my apologies, and I'm sorry if you felt that way. I never intended to say anything that you are imposing anything. I didn't say that. What I have said, when you made all those cases, those are very, very valid cases. But the people in India, and I'm quoting yourself, they're a little intellectually innocent. So intellectually innocent is a different word of the word that you have used. I don't want to call them stupid. So the way they take it, they take your idea. All your ideas are beautiful, sir. And we respect that we need to, I have so many friends here who are Tamilian or Telugu or different languages, and I try to speak their language. So that's my choice, that I try to communicate with them. I try to understand their culture, but that doesn't mean that somebody asked me to do that. That's my choice. So when you float some idea, and you know how poisonous they're in the politics, how this politics is, when you float some idea, and how do they communicate or interpret this idea? Oh, they already have this superiority complex about Hindi, Hinduism, and all sort of kind of things. So what I
don't mix up Hinduism with Hindustani. That is a separate issue. This Hindu imposition, I have condemned repeatedly. As you know, I am talking of Hindustani. Please don't mix up the religion with language.
Sir, it's not about you. You are fine. You are a very fine man, very wise man. You understand. I'm talking about the people. How do they take it? Majority of the people, they do not understand the difference between all these things. Here, everybody is very, very, intellectual. Their, IQ level is here. You cannot, this is not a benchmark, or this is not something that you can represent the entire India. I'm talking about the people. How do they take it? Do me a favor, sir. Go and read your Facebook comment where we have posted this video, and you will understand the mindset of the people. How are they taking it? It's like divide, either extreme right or extreme left. They're not understanding the gist of this idea. And that was my fear.
I think that's an important point, that language is not just about the meaning of words. And
yes, I'm on the webinar.
It's not just about the meaning of words. It's about tone. It is about context. It's about history. Language is much more than just words. And I mean, if language were words, then a dictionary would be a living thing. It's not. A dictionary comes to life only when these words are used, interpreted, reinterpreted. And the diversity of people means there'll be a diversity of interpretations. So actually speaking, when you say, sir, you Tamilians, actually the fact is that even in Tamil Nadu, we are not one kind of Tamilians. There are many kinds of Tamilians. Here on this panel, there are people from different political views, very clearly. They don't agree with each other.
But why do you twist my words? When
not you.
Listen to me. When I say I'm only suggesting that Tamilians should learn Hindi, immediately you twist it and say that Justice Katju is saying that Hindi should be imposed. Why must you twist my words?
A few people.
No, most of you do it. Listen, I had to delete so many of my posts where I got filthy abuses. When I start by saying that I'm totally opposed to Hindi imposition, I've fought in deeds against Hindi imposition, as I told you just now. And you twist my words and say, no, Justice Katju wants imposition of Hindi. Wonderful. I mean, what kind of logic is this?
No, you are actually, unfortunately, Facebook is the wrong forum, as I said before, because
tell me the forum.
Specialized people, a lot of bored people,
Which forum should I go
bored
to? Do I
people
want
are
Twitter or
waiting to
where should I
pounce
go?
on somebody, because it's very easy to post on Facebook and abuse somebody. People get abusive very quickly. It's very interesting. The amount of abusive content on Indian social media gives me the thought that maybe this kind of language was used even in ancient India, in which case all our ancient texts should be rewritten to reflect contemporary Indian preferences for swear words. Anyway, that's a different issue. What I mean to say is that I think face-to-face, this kind of meetings are much better. I think, I hope this discussion here reassured you that Tamilians are actually very polite people.
They are. There's no doubt. I love Tamilians.
Well, one comment I want to make, the final comment, when you said that Tamilians are very polite people, this is the example. I wonder if we can have the similar discussion sitting in Delhi or Meerut and talking about, I mean, just imagine if it was other way around, somebody would have said to the UP people, hey, you need to learn Tamil. And it's just an idea. It's just an idea, just a suggestion. I'm not imposing, but you guys should learn Tamil. And just imagine if you're having this debate there in Lucknow or Allahabad for the fact.
Okay. I think that's a good
imagine
suggestion.
If they could have that.
Irfan, that's a good suggestion.
May I respond?
We'll try to organize that.
May I respond to Irfan?
Yes, sir.
The problem in UP and other Hindi-speaking states is not that they're opposed to Tamil. The fanatics are opposed to English. And I have been fighting with them against it. They say, Angrezi hatao, Angrezi dasi hai, English is a slave girl, all nonsense they talk, and I have been fighting against them. They are not against learning Tamil, they are against English. They want English to be abolished. Whereas I say English must be further extended more, it should be taught more because it is the language of science. And this is the age of science, you can't do without English. So I go to their meetings where these Hindi fanatics are sitting, and I tell them your children will become only fit to drive bullock carts if you don't teach them English. And you people are talking nonsense. And you know, when I said this in the Allahabad High Court Bar Association, after that, many lawyers came to me and said, Justice Katju, we agree with you. What you are saying is correct. They agreed with me that Justice. I said, look, I'm not an enemy of Hindi. It's my mother tongue. I love Hindi, but at the same time, you should not be foolish talking that English should be abolished when you can't do without English in the modern world. So I represent rational thinking and I present my ideas, and it's up to you to accept it or reject it. I'm a totally democratic person.
Yes, sir. So there is Mr. Natraj, who spoke earlier, is back. He would like to say something. And after that, we'll have one last word from you and we'll close this session. Natraj can be unmuted.
What about Sanjana Jayant of who's in
She
Australia?
left.
Oh,
no, she left. She's not here.
Okay.
Natraj, are you unmuted?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
So I was, though I was in another meeting, it's such an interesting debate or discussion. I continue to hear whatever people had to say. So I'm returning. So it's a very, very enlightening debate, which thanks to Justice Katju, this was arranged. In fact, Justice Katju used to quote Article 300 of the Constitution, which allows or permits or gives an opportunity, not permit or this thing, opportunity for all Indians to go and do business in any part of the country. So that is a very big constitutional right which has been endowed on the people of India. And for that, learning other languages, why should it be an obstruction? Why should we debate on that? If it is required, we should. In fact, somebody mentioned that I'm an engineer, I'm a doctor, I don't need to know other language. What a stupid thing it is. How can, see, now we have the infrastructure development taking place all over the country. and medical officers are required everywhere. And there are so many of my own family who are serving in North India, doctors and engineers. They are in so many infrastructure cases. How can you say that I don't need the Hindi or any other language because I don't have to serve in other? Can we give all the jobs here? It is not possible. So this kind of approach, as Mr. Irfan Ali very rightly said, we see only two extremes, either too left or too right. So the middle path where it is required, that kind of approach we should have. I am with Mr. Katju that if it is required, we should. In fact, some of the people who come, the North Indian clients who come to some of these places, if you know the language, they are very happy. And we are very happy, as I said initially, when Katju says Vanakkam, we are all so thrilled. So why can't you have that kind of a broad outlook? We should have a broad outlook. In fact, this issue has been highly politicized in Tamil Nadu, highly politicized. Given an opportunity, drop of a hat, everybody wants to politicize the language issue, which is not at all correct. And it is high time we grew over this. And the youngsters, I'm very happy. They are very clear. They are very clear that they will learn what is required for them. They will not be nose-led by selfish politicians who run schools offering Hindi, make their children study in English medium, but not permit other people to have their choice. How can you do this? This is totally not correct. And we should have very broad outlook. And I'm very happy this debate has been started by Mr. Katju. The choice, freedom of choice should be with the individual. That cannot be as much as we say that another foreign language should not be imposed on us. Similarly, you give the choice to freedom to the individual to learn whatever he wants. Why should we have this kind of extreme view? So I'm sure the points raised in the debate are taken in the right spirit, not politicized, and we see reason. So thank you very much, Katju sir, for having initiated this debate.
Thank you.
May I mention here that in many of my judgments in the Supreme Court, I have quoted Tirukural, I have quoted Subramanya Bharati, I have quoted other Tamil writers very often. And when I went to California, in California, there are a lot of Tamilians, and they have set up schools for teaching their children Tamil because many of the children don't know Tamil. And I used to go to those schools where they are voluntary organizations of Tamilians. They want their children to learn Tamil. So I help them in promoting Tamil. I've been helping Tamilians even in California, where they have set up Tamil schools, and I used to go there and tell them about Tamil culture and all. I used to tell the children and the teachers. So I am a great supporter of Tamil. Please don't misunderstand me. Thank you.
Yes, we fully endorse your point about being a big supporter of Tamilians. We all know that. And that's why we are here discussing for so long with you. And thank you very much for being here and for initiating this debate and having the patience to listen to so many speakers, their points of view, which some of it you may not agree with, but some of it you may agree with also. But this has been a very wonderful debate, and thank you once again. And I would like to thank all the speakers who are here, Dr. Tyagu, Thiru Natraj, Thiru Anadarai, Mohan Kumaramangalam, Thiru Karthikey Chelvan, and Sukhi Venkatesh. With this, I would like to bring this discussion, and it's more of a discussion than a debate, and certainly there was no war. So in that sense, the name of the program was meant to attract an audience, but actually there is no war here. There's more peace. So we end in peace. And thank you very much once again for all of you to be here, and especially to Justice Katju. Look forward to more such debates in future. Thank you.
Thank you. Romba Nandri. Romba Nandri.
बहुत धन्यवाद. शुक्रिया.
Irfan, Romba Nandri means thank you. Irfan should start learning Tamil.
So thank you very much, sir. Katju sir, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Romba Nandri.
Shukriya, adab.
Adab. Bindu is here. Bindu is from Karnataka. Please give her a few minutes to speak. Hello, Bindu. Dhanraj, please allow Bindu to speak. She's from Karnataka. She's on the show. Hello, Dhanraj. Can you hear me? Hello, Dhanraj. Can you hear me? I don't know whether he's closed the program. Bindu, sorry, it seems he's closed the program.